A young, portly man stares in disbelief at the woman before him. Dressed in a maid's uniform, she introduces herself as Ilsa. The man's mind reels, struggling to understand how this situation came to be. His thoughts drift to a simulation RPG he once played, The Orcs Counterattack. The game's villain was Ludwig von Baalberg, the brutish crown prince of the Baalberg Empire. This character, known for his orc-like visage, would conquer the Western nations, enslaving princesses, female knights, and even village girls to satisfy his cruel desires. The horrifying realization dawns on him. He has become that very villain. He recalls the game's unforgiving nature. The protagonist's execution would lead to the destruction of the entire country. Beyond that lay a rebellion ending, a suicide ending, and a ruin ending. A game with a 0% survival rate. Overwhelmed by this grim future, he collapses in tears, picturing himself bound for execution. His despair is interrupted by the maid's voice. She asks what's wrong. He recognizes her from the game as Ilsa Hildebrand, his personal attendant. He hesitantly asks if that is her name, and she confirms it. The chilling reality sets in. This is no dream. The game's scenario has begun. He remembers that in the game's tutorial, Ilsa was the first person to suffer from Ludwig's cruelty. Determined to change this outcome, he forces himself to compose his expression. He assures her that nothing is wrong and that he is fine, resolving to alter his grim destiny. He feels a surge of nervousness, realizing he's never spoken to such a lovely person before. Ilsa, for her part, is taken aback by the crown prince's uncharacteristically polite demeanor. She formally introduces herself again as the maid assigned to serve His Highness Ludwig and asks for his command. He tells her that, for now, he would appreciate being left alone. Noticing her hesitation, he asks if there is something amiss with him. Ilsa flinches, her expression turning to one of fear as she hastily denies that anything is wrong. He softens his tone, expressing gratitude that she is willing to serve someone like him and urges her to rest. With a quiet, "Excuse me," she bows and closes the door, leaving him alone with his thoughts. His mind then turns to the game's heroine, Solveig. A commoner elevated to nobility, she was forced into a political marriage with him. He recalls her absolute disdain, how she called him an orc and eventually became the leader of the rebellion that would bring about his downfall. He considers his other enemies. The prime minister would have him assassinated if his favorability dropped. His own father, the emperor, despised him. Surrounded by foes on all sides, he comes to a stark conclusion. In this hostile world, the only person he might be able to rely on is his personal maid, Ilsa. He considered his options. In the game's logic, Ilsa was a hidden character, one who could be won over. He knew that if he couldn't make her an ally, he would be completely isolated. His path to survival was clear. He had to secure her loyalty. With his mind made up, he looked down at his portly frame. He understood that his first task was to overcome his own physical weakness. He had to become stronger, and he would start now. A potential future, one of the game's bad endings, flashed through his mind. Ilsa being tormented by the story's heroines. He vowed to himself that he would absolutely prevent that outcome. His thoughts were shattered by the arrival of his father, Gotthard von Baalberg. The man's face was a mask of contempt as he asked if Ludwig was satisfied now that he had brought shame upon their house. He declared that Ludwig was the sole disgrace to the family name. It was then revealed that Ilsa had been ordered to report on Ludwig's every move. Gotthard continued his tirade, lamenting that he had no use for such a son and wished for a more competent heir. Despite his disgust, he stated that since Ludwig had survived, he would be granted one final chance. The threat hung in the air, and Ludwig was paralyzed with fear. The confrontation left him reeling. Lying in bed, he clutched his head, feeling as if it might split apart. Through his panic, he heard Ilsa's voice, filled with concern, asking if he was all right. She leaned over him, calling his name, Lord Ludwig. He blinked, dazed. Ilsa expressed her relief that he was conscious. Still trying to clear his head, he looked up at her and asked why she was so worried about it. A gentle smile formed on her face. She replied that while it was her duty, she was also genuinely happy to care for him. Her unexpected sincerity touched him, and he managed a quiet, heartfelt thank you. She told him that he should rest, adding that she couldn't relax while he was there. With a polite bow, she excused herself. The moment the door closed, Ludwig's resolve returned. It was time to begin. He would start with squats. He collapsed to the floor, his body heavy and uncooperative. The effort was immense, the simple act of movement proving to be a grueling task. His mind drifted to a recent dream, a stark contrast to his current struggle. In it, he was feasting, surrounded by food and wine. Ilsa's voice from the dream urged him to eat his fill, a memory that caused him to cry out her name in the present. Later, after a meal, Ludwig found the courage to speak. He told Ilsa that once her duties were concluded, he had a request for her. With a neutral expression, she acknowledged his words, stating she would make preparations and would require some time. He then clarified his unusual proposition. He wanted her to provide special guidance to help him lose weight. The request caught Ilsa completely off guard. Her eyes widened in shock, swirling with disbelief as she processed what he had just asked. Ludwig pressed on, explaining that he knew she was a formidable warrior. He revealed his knowledge of her family, the Hildebrands, a clan skilled in assassination and covert arts, making her the perfect candidate. With his reasoning laid bare, he dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the floor, desperately pleading for her help to change himself. A painful memory surfaced, Solveig's cold dismissal of a kneeling man, deeming him useless for failing to keep a promise. Her disdainful words echoed in his mind, fueling his resolve. Returning to the present, Ilsa Hildebrand stood over the prostrated Ludwig, her shadow falling upon him as she considered his desperate plea. He looked up, his face filled with determination, and urged her not to hold back. He declared that he would endure any hardship she could devise, ready to prove himself. She finally gave her answer. After confirming he was truly serious, she agreed to train him without mercy. However, she established a new rule. He was no longer to call her Ilsa, but instructor. The sudden formality left Ludwig stunned. Her demeanor shifted entirely. With an intense, almost cruel smile, she informed him that from this moment on, she would only accept "yes, ma'am" as a response. She then cheerfully pointed, announcing that his training ground was ready. Ludwig could only stare, a wave of terror washing over him. He begins by explaining that he has been on a strict diet and exercise regimen for months, but it's a slow, grueling process. He believes this method of body modification is the only way forward for him. Before he can finish his thought, Ilsa suddenly seizes his wrist. Startled, he cries out for her to wait, looking down at her grip with a flustered and confused expression. The unexpected force sends him tumbling to the ground, where he lets out a pained shriek. Ilsa peers down at him with a deceptively sweet smile, asking if he is all right, though he is clearly in distress. Leaning over him, her expression hardens into one of command. She informs him that from this moment forward, his only permissible responses to her are yes or "yes, ma'am." His training begins at once with a grueling wall climb. Exhausted and trembling, he struggles to pull himself up the rough stone surface as Ilsa calls up to him from below, asking how he is faring. After the punishing climb, she provides a massage to soothe his aching muscles. He groans in relief, finding the feeling surprisingly pleasant as Ilsa remarks that proper body care is also important. Sitting up, he reflects on their new dynamic. He observes that this training is a mutual agreement between two people who like each other, not something forced upon them by an outside party. With this understanding, he thanks her for the massage. She smiles warmly at his sentiment. As he looks on, slightly flustered, she formally states that she looks forward to their session tomorrow. He agrees, replying that he is also looking forward to it. Half a year later, Ludwig stands before Ilsa, his physique noticeably more toned. She remarks that his body has become quite firm, and he agrees, though he notes with some confusion that his weight hasn't decreased. Ilsa smiles, explaining that the special training he's undergoing is designed to compress his muscles by slamming him into the ground, so it's only natural. To continue this process, she points enthusiastically towards a high balcony. She announces that to further compress his muscles, today's training will take place on the 3rd floor. Ludwig stares up at the daunting height, a look of dread on his face as he lets out a choked gasp. After the grueling session, he soaks in a large pool. Ilsa asks if he feels refreshed, and he confirms that he does. Without missing a beat, she informs him that there's no time to rest, as the next part of his training is about to begin. Moments later, a new challenge emerges from the water. A young woman with long blonde hair and a powerful fishtail. Ilsa introduces her as a sea kelpie, a special combat unit for underwater engagements. She explains that if Ludwig can defeat her, he will earn the hero coin and advises him to think carefully about how to fight effectively in the water. The kelpie strikes without warning, sending a massive splash of water into the air. Caught completely by surprise, Ludwig flails helplessly, crying out in panic as he is dragged beneath the surface. After the underwater ordeal, Ilsa offers him a hand with a gentle smile, congratulating him on his hard work. As an attendant with cat ears helps him from the pool, Ludwig expresses his gratitude. However, his relief is short-lived. He sees Ilsa sighing and covering her face in her hand, and a horrified scream escapes his lips, echoing across the estate. His scream transitions to the clang of steel on steel in a courtyard. Ludwig now wields a massive sword, practicing his form. Ilsa watches him intently, remarking that his current fighting style is ill-suited for a monarch. She suggests that a sword and shield style would be stronger, but concedes it is a lesson he must learn for himself. He thinks back to a past failure, a battle against a colossal dragon-like beast where he was utterly defeated. Ilsa explains that his training regimen was designed with that first battle in mind. She then informs him that she has taught him all she can, and the rest is up to him. With a renewed sense of purpose, he continues his practice. Ilsa watches with a bright, encouraging smile, telling him he's doing a great job as he swings the heavy blade with focused determination. He stands triumphantly, his body now lean and defined from the relentless training. "I did it," he exclaims, a bead of sweat on his brow. In the background, Ilsa applauds, offering praise. Catching his breath, he reflects that while only a year has passed, the journey to this point felt incredibly long. Turning to his instructor, he cheerfully points out that while she taught him the dual-wielding style, he still has a ways to go with his physique. Ilsa's expression is calm, almost serene, as she delivers a startling announcement. "With this, my role as your instructor is over." In a memory from his childhood, a young Ludwig von Baldberg felt the stares of others upon him. He thought to himself how embarrassing it was to be the only one without a partner. Taking the hand of his young attendant, Ilsa, he declared that she would be his wife, much to her surprise. He led her towards a grand building, where Ilsa explained that this was a place for the children of nobles. Ludwig, with a determined grin, stated that this meant he would be ostracized by everyone. Despite this, he seemed perfectly content practicing alone with a stick. When Ilsa asked if he was truly all right with being by himself, he confidently replied that it was his own choice. His affection for her was clear as he shyly presented her with a flower, promising to give her anything. Ilsa accepted it graciously. He asked if she was happy, and she confirmed that she was. This memory of a more straightforward time fades into the present. Ludwig, now older and heavier, lamented how he had become nothing more than a fat pig. His thoughts were interrupted by Solveig, who coldly told him that if he understood his position, he should act accordingly and not cause trouble for her father. After her sharp rebuke, Ludwig spoke with Ilsa, noting that everyone seemed to think he was a fool. Ilsa calmly confirmed that this was the general consensus. He then remarked that even she, who had been by his side for 10 years, must think the same. Her words brought back another memory. His father, Gotthard, explaining that the Imperial Academy was for developing human resources. He had told Ludwig that even if he lacked talent, he should at least build connections. The memory caused Ludwig to clench his fist in silent frustration. The weight of these expectations followed him to a formal ball, his own send-off party. He felt everyone avoiding him and considered retreating to a less conspicuous place. Just then, Ilsa appeared, no longer in her maid uniform but in an elegant gown. She offered to be his partner for the evening, but a flustered Ludwig told her to stop teasing him. Her offer sparked another memory of his younger self, happily telling Ilsa he was looking forward to their future together. The scene then returns to the present, showing the grand ball several days later. After the ball, with Ilsa back in her maid attire, Ludwig asked for her continued guidance. She questioned his request, reminding him she was just a maid. He responded that he felt more at ease with her than any noblewoman, revealing a startling truth. He had known her since his previous life. A young woman with long blonde hair, Olivia, approaches a dark-haired student named Leon, asking if he's going to a study session. Leon seems uncertain, questioning if it's all right for him to attend. Olivia reassures him that she would be happy if he came, reaching for his hand with a gentle smile. His hesitation draws attention. Another student, Solveig, insists it's fine, but Leon, completely flustered, bows deeply in apology. He exclaims that he's merely a background character and feels he doesn't belong, startling the girls around him. He then turns to his attendant, Ilsa, his demeanor shifting entirely. With a smug grin, he declares that everything is proceeding as planned. He confidently states that the heroine, Olivia, is unexpectedly powerless, implying he can manipulate the situation to his own advantage. In the next instant, his confidence evaporates. He throws himself at Ilsa, clinging to her desperately while crying out her name. He quickly composes himself, pulling back with a smile to tell Ilsa that he did it all for her. His words leave her blushing and looking away, clearly flustered. The scene shifts to a formal ceremony where Gotthard von Baldberg addresses a crowd. He announces that from this day forward, Leon Faubartfort is his son and must be treated as such. Beside him stands Olivia, now identified as the same. The memory of this event seems to be the cause of his earlier breakdown. Leon sobs uncontrollably in Ilsa's arms, pleading with her to take responsibility for him as she gently pats his head. Later, he examines a document with a serious expression. It describes a reverse harem end where the creator gets to play with the capture targets. Olivia explains to him that the method of capture is, in fact, physical conquest. Standing before the assembled student body, Leon makes a bold declaration. He announces his intention to enjoy himself for the next 3 years and asks everyone to turn a blind eye to his actions. Behind him, Ilsa quietly encourages him to do his best. In the bustling academy hallway, Leon cheerfully addresses his friends, Livia and Olivia. He announces with a broad smile that he's inviting them to start something with him. Livia, intrigued, asks him to clarify what he means. His cheerful moment is cut short by the arrival of a new student, a blonde girl named Natalia. She declares that she will be taking Olivia, dismissing Leon's invitation entirely. He protests, insisting that such matters should be decided by Olivia herself, but Natalia stands firm, a smug look on her face. She formally introduces herself as Natalia Bardheim, from the Radia Commonwealth. She explains her purpose, to find a suitable partner for the Sacred Tree Maiden, a role Olivia now holds. With disdain, she proclaims that the men of this kingdom are utterly unworthy of such an honor. Her gaze falls upon Leon. She mentions hearing rumors of a commoner knight, but expresses her disappointment, stating that a commoner like him is certainly not a suitable partner. Leon grits his teeth, barely containing his frustration at her condescending words. Before he can retort, Livia steps forward, admonishing Natalia for her rudeness. Natalia, however, coolly dismisses her, stating that she has no business with anyone else. Livia stands her ground, undeterred. She then pulls Leon aside, whispering an explanation. Livia reveals that Natalia is a noetch, a pure and innocent person, and likely wants to become a saint herself, which is why she's so fixated on Olivia. She warns Leon not to get involved, as he would be the only one to lose if he did. Leon is left flustered and bewildered by the strange revelation. Later, in the classroom, a teacher announces that Natalia will be joining their class. She points out a vacant seat next to Leon, but before Natalia can move, Livia quickly volunteers to take that spot herself, offering up her own seat instead. The teacher, surprised, asks if she is certain. During a practical exercise, Leon watches Natalia with growing apprehension. She stands effortlessly atop a swirling vortex of water, a display of immense power. He realizes with a sinking feeling that she is the heroine of the second game, possessing combat abilities far beyond his own. He concludes that victory against her is impossible. As the day concludes, Livia approaches the troubled Leon. She tells him not to worry and hands him a file, explaining that it's a report she compiled on Natalia's weaknesses. She encourages him to use it to his advantage. Leon looks at the report, stunned, as Livia shyly thanks. Their conversation is interrupted by a uniformed official. He informs Leon that he has been summoned by the student council president. Livia explains that this is a necessary procedure due to the impending duel. The official then formally requests that they both follow him. He listened as Livia offered some words of encouragement. She admitted that she had never been invited to a dance by anyone other than Ilsa, but told him not to worry about it. As he began to stammer about her dancing with someone else, she presented him with an item. With a look of fierce determination, she declared that winning alongside Ludwig was enough for her, and then wished him good luck. At a lavish party filled with guests, Ludwig von Baldberg stands awkwardly in a formal suit, feeling entirely out of place. Beside him, Ilsa Hildebrand is a vision of elegance in a black evening gown, possessing a mature charm that makes her seem far older than the 3 years she is on it. He turns to leave, muttering that he shouldn't have come, but Ilsa stops him. She asks what is wrong, reminding him that as the star of the empire, the festivities cannot begin without it. As they are greeted by a young woman who thanks them for attending, Ludwig flinches internally. Ilsa's encouraging words feel as sharp as an oak branch, and he is overwhelmed by the dazzling proof of his high status. His gaze sweeps across the room, recognizing the attendees as nobles of the Baldberg kingdom, including several students from his own school. As he takes in the scene, a young woman's voice cuts through, asking for a dance. Now on the dance floor with Ilsa, he struggles with the steps, his face a mask of concentration as he tries not to step on her feet. Ilsa, however, smiles warmly and praises him, telling him he is doing very well. She continues to guide him, explaining that while proper etiquette is to look at one's partner's chest, it will be fine as long as he keeps his eyes off his own feet. With a gentle smile, she simply tells him to look at her. He realizes he should be focusing on Ilsa, not his feet, but the thought brings a wave of guilt. He feels he should be with the girl he truly likes. He stops dancing abruptly. When Ilsa asks what's wrong, he recovers, suggesting they dance again since this is their only opportunity. Just then, a blonde girl named Sophia approaches, stating she has waited long enough and asks Ludwig for a dance. The sight of her makes Ludwig freeze, his entire body trembling in shock. His mind flashes back to a previous conversation where Sophia told him she would be waiting for him at the party. As the memory surfaces, she smiles, telling him she is glad he kept his promise to come. Before he can respond, Ilsa steps between them. She apologizes curtly and declares herself, Ilsa Hildebrand, as Prince Ludwig's partner for the evening. She tells a stunned Sophia that Ludwig is angry on her behalf, because Sophia, a mere baron's daughter, failed to even greet her. Ilsa finishes by stating that Sophia is not a suitable match for his highness. She continued to press her point, her voice cold and sharp. Ilsa reminded Sophia that she had been warned before, and that as the daughter of a mere viscount, she had no right to be there. Only she, as Ludwig's attendant, was qualified to stand by his side. Sophia was left speechless, her face a mask of disbelief. The tense standoff was shattered by an angry voice. A young man in a formal suit stepped forward, demanding to know if Ludwig was the ogre he'd heard about. He declared that a promise had been made 2 years prior, and he would not allow someone who looked down on others to be with his lady, accusing Ilsa of encouraging such behavior. Before the situation could escalate further, another figure intervened. Eleonora, the student council president, calmly addressed the furious young man as Rudolph, telling him to stand down. She explained that the one who had acted improperly was the woman who started the incident by throwing a drink. It is, she stated, the duty of an attendant to protect their master from such disrespect. Ludwig explains his actions to a flustered Livia. He admits that he approached her because he couldn't bear the thought of someone else winning her over, acknowledging that it was a selfish impulse. His expression hardens as he turns to face Sophia and Eleonora. He declares fiercely that he will not hand Livia over to either of them and tells them to leave. After they depart, he immediately bows his head to Livia, apologizing for getting carried away and acting selfishly. He offers to take her home, but she reassures him, smiling softly as she admits she was happy he got angry on her behalf. Ludwig smiles warmly, thanking her. Overcome with emotion, Livia's eyes well up with tears as she thanks him in return, touched that he considers her so important. He tells her the feeling is mutual. Standing by the window, they agree to get along well from that point forward. Later, lying in bed, Ludwig reflects on the evening. He realizes his response was far from the calculated, adult one he had planned. He understands that he has now deviated from a destined path, and that he is beginning to see the women around him as real people, not just roles to be played. He continues to wrestle with his thoughts, realizing he is now caught between two powerful figures. The pressure of having to choose a direction weighs on him, and he grits his teeth in frustration, feeling unable to make a decision. In another room, Livia, now in a simple nightgown, tells Ludwig she cannot accept his apology. She brings up the dance and a gift he gave her, seemingly troubled by the circumstances surrounding it. She grows more flustered, insisting that she's not a spare or a substitute for someone else. Ludwig listens, a look of confusion on his face as he tries to grasp her meaning. He suddenly grabs her by the shoulders, startling her. He earnestly tells her that wasn't his reason for giving her the gift at all and asks directly if it isn't important to her. Taken aback, she confirms that it is, questioning why he would even ask such a thing. Flustered and sweating, Ludwig declares that he can no longer ignore Ilsa's feelings. He offers her the bed, stating his intention to sleep on the sofa. But Ilsa grabs him with surprising strength, rejecting his offer. She insists that he must sleep in the bed, and that they will do so together. Having pulled him into the bed, she lies back with a soft, contented smile. She muses aloud about the novelty of sleeping in the same bed as a man, while Ludwig lies beside her, wide-eyed and stammering her name in disbelief. He stammers, face flushed red, that this is his first time. As the night settles over the estate, Ludwig resigns himself to his fate, thinking that he and his orc will just have to endure the night together. As dawn breaks, Ludwig's eyes snap open. He lies in bed next to Ilsa, a sense of urgency on his face. He knows he should get up, but she stirs beside him, murmuring that she'd like to stay like this a little longer. He stammers her name, flustered and sweating, clearly overwhelmed by her proximity. Ilsa, however, simply smiles, her eyes still closed, and wishes him a good morning, her voice thick with contentment. She admits that she was so happy she couldn't sleep the previous night. A bashful smile spreads across Ludwig's face as he confesses that he, too, had stayed up watching over her all night. Her joy is palpable as she embraces him tightly. After a moment, Ludwig gently reminds her that it's time to get up, as they both have their daily routines to attend to. She softly agrees. He suddenly pulls away and rushes for the door, insisting that Ilsa should stay and rest. He declares he'll go on his own, leaving her calling his name in surprise. Outside, he reflects on his newfound energy. He feels he's no longer the lazy person he once was, but worries that staying with the kind Ilsa will cause him to regress. He resolves to complete his training, fearing a rebound into his old habits. His determination is interrupted when he spots a young woman with blonde hair, practicing with a wooden sword in the courtyard. He approaches cautiously, bowing and apologizing for the interruption. The woman, Ophelia, tells him not to worry, as it's just the courtyard. She then turns to him with a sharp gaze, asking how he knows her name. Ludwig becomes flustered, explaining that they are in the same class. He internally panics, realizing it sounds as if he's been watching her. He quickly adds that Her Highness Ophelia is known to be accompanied by the Prince of the United Kingdom. She processes his words, a look of understanding on her face. She realizes he must be referring to Ludwig, then states that it's settled and there was no mistake. Ludwig is taken aback, shocked that she knows who he is. With a curious smile, she asks what business he has in the courtyard so early in the morning. Ludwig confirms that he also came to train. Her smile lingers, her expression unreadable. She tells him not to mind her, as she was just taking a break. Ludwig, however, is completely flustered. He insists that watching him train is uninteresting and that as the Mad Dog's knight, he has no connection to her. He shouts, demanding to know why she has any interest in him at all. In response, she simply offers him a towel with a bright, encouraging smile, urging him to hurry. He is momentarily stunned, thinking to himself that her cuteness is that of a true heroine. His admiration is cut short as her expression twists into a menacing grin. With a powerful kick, she sends a blast of force toward him, launching him into the air. He lands precariously on a high window ledge of a nearby building. 30 minutes later, Ludwig explains that since she has been watching him, he wonders if it would be acceptable for him to observe her training in return. He asks if her training always involves such unconventional methods as scaling walls and leaping from them. As Ophelia considers his question, Ilsa suddenly appears beside him. She remarks that his interaction with Ophelia reminds her of their own first meeting, and that the only proper response is yes or yes. Ophelia, meanwhile, thinks to herself that this situation is different from the rumors she's heard. Curious, Ludwig asks if she knows Sophia, mentioning rumors that they are close. Ophelia confirms this, adding that she doesn't know him very well yet. The mention of the heroine's name triggers a horrifying realization in Ludwig. He remembers a specific outcome. If he were to neglect the heroine and allow Ilsa's affection to reach 200%, it would result in the darkness end. He understands with dawning horror that he has fulfilled those conditions. His fear is confirmed as he recalls the game's information. It only listed the conditions for the bad end, with the culprit marked as unknown, but he is now certain it has to be Ilsa. He realizes with terror that he has no idea how her affection rose so high, and that she has now completely transformed into a dangerous obsessive. As if summoned by his terror, Ilsa appears before Ophelia, her smile unsettling and her eyes devoid of light. She asks why Ophelia is with her master. Ophelia, in turn, asks if it wasn't a good thing for her to be Ludwig's attendant. With a chillingly formal tone, Ilsa introduces herself by her full name, Ilsa Hildebrand. Following her introduction, she performs an elaborate curtsy, declaring that she is a fortunate person to be able to serve such a master. Both Ludwig and Ophelia watch, bewildered by her display. She then bows deeply, asking for their pardon. Ophelia stammers her title in confusion, while Ludwig, completely aghast, demands to know the meaning of her actions. He listened, stunned, as Ophelia explained her reasoning. She acknowledged his poor reputation, but clarified that she had witnessed him behave rudely toward royalty from another nation to protect his own followers. Because of that, she saw no reason to be impolite to him. Ilsa watched the exchange in silence. She continued, stating that even if she were surrounded by those who scorned him, she found his actions interesting and would not be swayed. With that, she announced she would be taking her leave. A chill ran through Ludwig as he processed her words, and he saw Ilsa step forward to handle her departure. As Ophelia walked away, he couldn't help but marvel that she, whom he considered a simple, muscle-brained heroine, was the first person at the Imperial Academy to show him any interest. His thoughts were interrupted as Ilsa clapped her hands together, cheerfully suggesting they resume their training. Her cheerful demeanor vanished in an instant. Leaning in with a chilling smile, she asked if he would prefer a training regimen twice as difficult as usual. Ludwig froze in terror, realizing her mood had soured completely. He feared he would be assassinated before he could even die properly. Her eyes, wide and devoid of warmth, locked onto his as she commanded that his only possible answer was yes. Sometime later, now dressed in a formal uniform, Ludwig stood as Ilsa adjusted his collar, noting a pleasant scent. She told him to wait while she straightened it. Once she finished, he stammered a thank you, his heart pounding with nervous energy. He then walked with Ilsa into a classroom, her briefcase in hand. As they entered, the other students turned to stare at the pair, their gazes lingering. A few hours into their studies, the classroom door slid open and Ophelia appeared, greeting them cheerfully. Ludwig jumped in surprise. As Ilsa returned the greeting with a polite good morning, he noticed the forced smile and the dangerous glint in her eyes. Their interaction drew the attention of another group, a woman in a nun's habit flanked by two armored knights. The woman wondered aloud how Ludwig and Ophelia had become so friendly. One of the knights, a man named Baptista, glared at Ludwig with open hostility, suggesting he be replaced with another boy. Ludwig recognized the woman as the scheming saint. In response to the saint's question, Ophelia casually slung an arm around Ludwig's shoulders, startling him. She cheerfully explained that they trained together. The saint declared this wonderful and expressed a desire to join them. Ludwig laughed nervously, trying to downplay it as a mere coincidence. His attempt was cut short by a chilling realization. Ilsa's eyes had gone completely lifeless. He heard her muttering for them to stop and knew, with dawning horror, that her jealousy was about to boil over. He watched the saint kneel, a grim understanding settling in. Though she spoke of cruelties, he knew she was, in fact, worshipping something else entirely. Her words then drifted to him, suggesting that the training of the Saint Natalia was not merely for appearances. She explained that Lord Minerva is a goddess of both harvest and war. Ophelia chimed in, noting that she also trains to fight, prompting the saint to suggest a match. Ludwig's internal thoughts soured at the display, labeling the pair the Mad Princess Knight and the Perverted Bitch. He couldn't fathom why these two were in the same class, especially as the saint mused it would have been better if the other heroine were present. Later, in a classroom, the instructor ordered everyone to their seats. Ludwig sat at his desk, his expression annoyed as he observed the diligence of his classmates, thinking them all to be tireless workers. He let out a sigh of relief as the day's lessons concluded, feeling he had finally been set free. His relief was cut short as he looked up to see Ilsa standing over him, her gaze cold and unwavering. She addressed him formally, her voice devoid of warmth. "Louis Sama," she began, "starting tomorrow, your training in the courtyard is forbidden." Ludwig could only manage a confused sound in response. His confusion instantly vanished, replaced by rigid obedience. He snapped to attention, saluting sharply as he replied, "Yes, instructor." Internally, however, he despaired, realizing a catastrophic event was already brewing before the main story had even begun. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ilsa presented him with a pair of wooden swords. She explained that she had modified the training weapons to suit his dual-wielding style and instructed him to use them. As he took them, Ludwig continued his count, his voice strained with effort. 987, 988. He pushed through the exhaustion, swinging the blades. They were 5 times heavier than standard swords, yet his relentless training allowed him to wield them. He remembered when he could barely lift 3. With a final, powerful swing, he reached his goal, 1,000. Sweat dripped from his brow, but a smile touched his lips. He reflected on the grueling year of special training with Ilsa. It had been incredibly difficult, but he was grateful. He thought of apologizing again, but his focus remained on his remaining hand and the sword he wielded in the night. His solitude was broken by a voice. Ophelia stood nearby, a massive sword resting on her shoulder. She remarked on his hard work, then pointedly asked what he was doing behind the dormitory so late, cheekily suggesting he was there to spy on her. Beside her, Sophia smiled. Ludwig froze, flustered, his only thought that he had come here specifically so Ilsa wouldn't get angry. He panted, exhausted from his training, as Ophelia offered some advice. She told him that for practice swings, it's better to use both hands on the sword. Even for a one-handed style, she stressed, the fundamentals are what truly matter. To demonstrate, She moved in close behind him, her body pressing against his as she guided his hands. "Like this," she instructed. Flustered by the sudden intimacy, he felt his mind race, his sense of personal space completely shattered. Ophelia, noticing his distraction, sharply asked if he was even listening and commanded him to clear his mind. He struggled to regain his composure, acknowledging to himself that while the situation had its appeal, such unexpected encounters were mentally exhausting. As he tried to process the moment, Sophia peeked out from behind Ophelia, her expression curious as she wondered about Ilsa's absence. The thought of Ilsa brought a wave of concern. He reminded himself that he goes to bed as soon as the lights are out, resolving not to give her any reason to worry. He didn't want to cause her any more trouble. His thoughts were interrupted by Ophelia's cheerful suggestion. With a confident smile, she proposed they have a sparring match, seeing as they were already training together. Ludwig could only stare back, taken aback by the offer. He immediately protested, expressing his apologies but insisting that the gap in their abilities was far too wide for a fair fight. Ophelia, however, dismissed his concerns. She reasoned that anyone undergoing such a grueling training regimen should, at the very least, provide her with a decent match. Her logic left him speechless. He conceded, admitting that his swordsmanship was still lacking and that she was overestimating him. A flicker of disappointment crossed Ophelia's face. She sighed, remarking that it was a shame, but that she wouldn't force a match on someone so clearly unwilling. As he watched her, Ludwig reflected that the rumors he'd heard about her were apparently true. Her expression grew more serious. She observed that his appearance, his manner of speaking, and his sincere attitude all matched the descriptions she had been given. Yet, she noted his eyes were different. They were not the eyes of a dull orc. A memory surfaced. She had seen that same determined look before, on the face of a captured soldier during the war with the Principality's allied forces. In a recollection, the captured Ophelia, though defeated, wore a smile of pure defiance. She declared that while they had lost, they had fought with all their might, and, because of that, she had no regrets. Snapping back to the present, she leaned in close, startling him. She mused aloud that whether in the game or in reality, he knew her as the handsome Ophelia. With a sly smile, she declared that if he was unwilling to spar, they would simply have to find another way for him to prove himself. Ludwig, confused by her sudden change in topic, questioned her, but she simply dismissed it as nothing. She smoothly presents a large, ornate sword to Ludwig under the starry night sky, as a low rumble emanates from a nearby building. She tells him that whether they spar or not, he must focus on his training, warning that if they delay any longer, the sun will rise. Startled, he can only stammer in agreement. The next morning in the dining hall, Ludwig explains to Ilsa that he had been training with Ophelia. He insists that he still considers Ilsa his instructor and had no intention of causing her any trouble by staying out late. His explanation is cut short, as Ophelia slams a tray of food onto their table with a cheerful greeting, asking if they had fun the previous night. The interruption drains the life from Ilsa's eyes, who grimly thinks that this path leads to an assassination end. Ludwig flinches at Ophelia's terrible timing. He tells her she's being meddlesome and should focus on learning the fundamentals of swordsmanship first. He then points out that she is, after all, receiving instruction from Lord Ludwig himself. In response, Ophelia rests her head on Ilsa's shoulder, questioning if Ilsa truly has the skill to teach her. With her eyes closed, Ilsa coolly replies that Ophelia is free to imagine whatever she pleases. Ludwig watches, horrified, recognizing the hair-trigger tension between the two women. His fear is realized when Ophelia challenges Ilsa to a duel after school. Ophelia declares that if she can satisfy their master, Ludwig, then she will keep her promise. Ilsa retorts with a sharp glare, asking if it's fashionable in the Printemps Commonwealth to mix assassins in with battle valkyries. Ludwig panics internally, thinking the combination is far too dangerous and that Ilsa is particularly scary when she's busy. He quickly tries to intervene, claiming he has important business after school and that's a bad idea. He suggests postponing until tomorrow, but immediately realizes that's no better. Ilsa, arms crossed, calmly asks Ophelia why she's so insistent on fighting. Ophelia simply beams, stating that if Ilsa has no other plans, then it's settled. Ludwig blurts out that it's because she's a battle maniac. Ophelia seems surprised for a moment before smiling with determination. She explains that she simply wants to fight the strong, comparing it to climbing a mountain because it's there. She elaborates on her philosophy, stating that by crossing swords, one can truly gauge the depths of an opponent's heart. It is, she believes, the best way to get to know someone. That is why, she concludes, she wants to know Ludwig. She stared intently, her words sharp, declaring that if he was to be called a filthy orc, then she wanted to see his true form for herself. Below her determined gaze, Ludwig's eyes widened in alarm. With that, she abruptly turned and walked away, bidding him farewell for now. He could only manage a stunned, hesitant reply as she departed. As he watched her go, Livia and Eleonora approached him, questioning if he truly intended to duel Ophelia. He nervously touched his collar, admitting that while the idea was audacious, he had his reasons. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief, thinking to himself that he had, for the time being, managed to avoid the dreaded assassination ending. Unseen by him, Ilsa watched from the shadows of a nearby doorway, her expression unreadable. Later, after classes had ended, She stepped out to meet him, asking how he wished to proceed. His gaze drifted past her to where Ophelia was training in the distance before he quietly agreed to her unspoken suggestion. As they walked together, they passed by Ophelia and Sophia. Ophelia called out his name in surprise, but Ilsa urged him onward, and he followed without looking back. She turned to him with a gentle smile, suggesting that a break now and then is a good thing. He seemed to brighten at the prospect. Their break took them to the imperial capital's main street, a thoroughfare bustling with people and festive decorations. Ludwig looked around in awe, exclaiming at the incredible energy of the crowd. She asked if this was his first time visiting the city streets, and he confirmed it was, wondering aloud if a festival was happening. Ilsa explained that since he was royalty, he had never been allowed to leave the palace. She added that her own family home was outside the capital, so she had been here before. She pointed toward one of the stalls, suggesting they try a popular local drink called a frappe. Ludwig stared at the cold, sweet beverages in astonishment, internally questioning the existence of such a modern-style drink in this medieval, European-esque world. He continued his stroll through the capital streets with Ilsa, who suddenly let out a soft, surprised sound. The cause of her surprise was the saint, who rushed towards them with a bright smile, calling out Ludwig's name. He recoiled, recognizing her immediately and thinking of her as a schemer. The surrounding crowd began to murmur, realizing he had been trying to get away from Ophelia. Despite his internal thoughts, he put on a polite face, greeting the saint and remarking on what a coincidence it was to meet her in such a place. She simply laughed in agreement. Her demeanor shifted as she leaned in close, her tone becoming seductive as she invited Ludwig for a drink. Before he could respond, Ilsa stepped forward, placing herself between them. She firmly stated that she and Ludwig were on their way to have a frappe that she had heard was quite good. Unfazed by the interruption, the saint clasped her hands together with a beaming smile and declared that she would join them. Ludwig could only stare in disbelief. Ilsa stepped forward once more, addressing the saint directly. She suggested that it would be an imposition, pointing out that the saint appeared to be in a hurry, judging by the presence of Baptista and the other knights behind her. Internally, Ilsa noted that one person had already fled the scene. The saint's smile remained, but her eyes held a cold glint. She explained that since Ludwig is the crown prince of the empire, deepening their relationship is a joyous occasion. She then asked Ilsa if she understood what she ought to prioritize. Nearby, Baptista broke into a nervous sweat. Unintimidated, Ilsa calmly countered, asking the saint to explain how her joining them for frappe aligns with the teachings of Minerva. The direct question left the saint momentarily speechless and flustered. The political underpinnings of the situation were clear. The Balburg Empire and the Minerva Holy Church had joined hands to ensure peace among the Western nations. Therefore, it was only natural for the saint to wish to foster a good relationship with the future emperor, Ludwig. However, her motives ran deeper. She was already considering the possibility of a future war between the Empire and the Western nations, and was taking preemptive measures to prepare for such a conflict. Standing before a grand building, Ludwig reflects on a certain prediction. He concedes that it is not entirely wrong, but perhaps an overestimation of what is to come. His thoughts darken as he considers his position. While he is indeed the crown prince of the Balburg Empire, he recalls a story known as Rebellion of the Dull Ogre, in which the prince is fated to meet a ruinous end regardless of the path taken. To him, this means a future on the throne simply does not exist. The scene shifts to a cafe, where Ludwig, having acquiesced, suggests that the saint join them for a frappe. The saint offers a cheerful thanks, but Ilsa merely bows, her displeasure at the arrangement palpable. A shopkeeper steps forward, ready to take their order. He turns to Ilsa, seeking her approval. She responds with cold formality, stating it is only natural for the saintess and the future emperor, whom she calls Louis Sama, to foster a political relationship. The formal title and detached tone of her words catch Ludwig completely off guard. Attempting to comfort her, he promises to rebuild her family's house, whether he becomes emperor or not. He then confidently states that he is not so dense as to be unaware of her hidden feelings for him. Ilsa looks away, quietly insisting that is not the case. At the counter, Ludwig orders a drink. The shopkeeper hands him a single, tall frappe, and as Ludwig takes it, he realizes with a jolt of panic that it has been served with only one straw. Before he can say anything, Ilsa steps in. She calmly addresses the shopkeeper, pointing out that the frappe is clearly intended for two people to share. The saint, witnessing the situation, kindly offers her own frappe to Ilsa. Caught in the awkward standoff, Ludwig nervously takes a sip from the shared glass, his eyes darting between the two women. Ilsa, however, completely ignores the saint's offer. She turns to Ludwig with a bright smile, urging him to drink with her quickly, insisting that a frappe is best enjoyed while it's cold. Without another word, she leans in, bringing her face inches from his to share the drink. Ludwig is stunned into silence by her forwardness, though he senses she is just as nervous as he is. With eyes squeezed shut, Ilsa commits to the bold gesture. He beams, exclaiming that the drink is cold, sweet, and incredibly delicious. Ilsa, whose face is bright red, agrees that her frappe is wonderful, reassuring him that she is perfectly fine. The saint then approaches them, asking for a moment of their time. With a wry smile, she remarks that it's a shame her knight, Baptista, seems to have his hands full with his own frappe. Ludwig watches her, thinking to himself how pitiful she seems. Her knight, sweating with unease, informs the saint that they can't linger any longer. She concedes that it can't be helped and bids them farewell, saying she will see them in the classroom the next day before turning to leave with her entourage. As they depart, the evening sky darkens around Ludwig and Ilsa. He stammers slightly, observing that they are now alone. Ilsa quietly agrees. She turns toward him, a gentle, blushing smile on her face as a soft breeze blows through her hair. He feels a blush creep up his own cheeks, realizing that while this may just be part of Ilsa's duties as an attendant, to him, it truly feels like a date. As he takes another sip from the shared cup, Ilsa's expression suddenly shifts to one of horrified realization, her eyes swirling in dizzying shock as the implication of their indirect kiss dawns on her. The drink now empty, Ilsa suggests that it's time for them to head back. As they begin to walk, Ilsa starts to remind him that they'll be late for his training, but he interrupts by suddenly reaching out and taking her hand in his. He holds her hand gently, hoping she was also happy to think of their outing as a date. He asks if they can come to the main street again to share another frappe. Looking down at their joined hands, Ilsa quietly agrees. A week later, he let out a wide yawn. The recent training had been so severe that he'd even dozed off in class, and he suspected Ophelia's harshness was somehow related to Ilsa. As he walked through the academy's corridors, his eyes fell upon a familiar pair, Solveig and the man who had been with Sophia. He overheard her asking what was wrong, and seeing the man's gaze fixed on him, Ludwig surmised they must have been spreading some nonsense about it. He gritted his teeth, wanting to avoid Sophia at all costs. If he lost his composure now, he felt it would be an admission of guilt regarding the rumors about him and that other woman. As the thought crossed his mind, Solveig and her companion walked right past him, their hands clasped together. Just as they passed, Livia stepped into the hallway, blocking the path of the other students. She cheerfully reminded Ludwig that it was nearly time for lunch, but her tone shifted as she turned her attention to the crowd. She asked Ludwig if he was aware of the rumors and if he found them distasteful, then requested his permission to purge those responsible. He stared at her, completely taken aback by her suggestion. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, pointing out that with the way blocked, they couldn't get to the dining hall themselves. His protest was met with scorn from the assembled students. One of them pointed a finger, shouting that a filthy orc like him had no right to eat there. The sentiment was echoed by the others. A grim realization dawned on Ludwig. This was just like the anonymous mobs online, people convinced of their own righteousness, attacking from the safety of crowd. As the crowd's insults grew louder, with taunts of fatty echoing in the hall, Ludwig muttered in distress that his true thoughts had accidentally slipped out. Livia, standing beside him, calmly confirmed that what he had said was, in fact, accurate. The confrontation was violently interrupted as Ophelia burst onto the scene, sending one of the students flying with a powerful kick. She addressed Livia, noting that even this secluded spot couldn't hide them from her. Turning her glare on Ludwig, she expressed her disgust, calling his words disgraceful for a noble. Ludwig could only stare in shock at her sudden arrival. She lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar of his uniform. Her face was inches from his as she furiously demanded to know what he had been doing with Sophia on the night of the ball. Panicked, he held up his hands defensively, pleading with her to calm down and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. He swore he hadn't met with that girl even once since the ball. Unseen by him, Thomas turned to Solveig, confirming his suspicions. He recounted how he had seen Ludwig enter the rose garden with someone else. He desperately denies the accusation, shouting that he doesn't know anyone named Thomas and insisting he did nothing wrong. He explains that on the day in question, he was with Ilsa the entire morning. Ophelia looks on, distressed, realizing she had wanted to ask him about the rumors herself without causing a scene. His voice rises in panic as he clarifies that they were just together, nothing more. Before he can say more, Ophelia interrupts, calling him a muscle-brained hero and drawing her sword with a sharp metallic ring. She declares that she will ascertain the truth of his words herself. Ludwig freezes, a sudden realization dawning on him. He had laid a hand on Ilsa. She points the blade directly at him, issuing a formal challenge. If he accepts the duel, she proclaims, it will be a full confession that he insulted her attendant, Ilsa, a woman she contemptuously refers to as a filthy orc. With Livia looking on anxiously, Ludwig's expression hardens. He formally accepts the challenge, stating that he, Ludwig von Baldberg, will fight to defend Ilsa's honor. He then adds a defiant condition. If she lacks the confidence to face him alone, she is welcome to have Ilsa join her for a 2-on-1 fight. He stands firm, roaring that he will make her apologize for her words. Across the courtyard, Ophelia's lips curl into a confident, predatory smile. Ophelia confronts Ludwig with a sharp, mocking grin. She declares that she will accept his challenge on behalf of von Ludwig, vowing to make him regret ever shaming Ilsa. She tells him to meet her at the training grounds after class. As Ludwig walks away, he thinks to himself that the time has finally come to use the special sword he had commissioned using his full authority as Crown Prince. He proudly presents his new weapon to a worried Ilsa, a pair of unique, twin-bladed swords he calls Suryu Uka. When she expresses her concern, he cuts her off, placing a finger to her lips and stating that it's her fault he has to accept such a demand in the first place. She covers her mouth, whispering that he has become just like the person who insulted him. He turns away, retorting fiercely that he has no intention of losing to Ophelia. His eyes narrow with conviction. He is absolutely certain that they can win. Later, at the training grounds, Ludwig stands opposite Ophelia before a massive crowd of students. With Ilsa standing nervously behind him, he glares at his opponent. Ophelia, now clad in armor, smirks, commending him for not running away. He glances around at the gallery of onlookers, realizing with a grimace that it seems the entire student body has gathered to watch him be humiliated by Ophelia. Ophelia, however, seems to take notice of his weapons. She remarks on his 2 swords, calling them quite something and asking if he understands what he's holding. With a confident grin, she asks if he truly believes she, a warrior, would overlook such a thing. With a sharp metallic ring, she draws her own massive blade. Acknowledging that Ophelia is indeed strong, she announces that it is time to begin. As he prepares, Ilsa's worried voice comes from behind him, pleading for him not to overdo it. He ignores her plea, crossing his twin swords in a ready stance. With a defiant shout, he challenges Ophelia to come at him. He braces for the incoming assault as Ophelia, impressed by his bravado, shouts her approval and charges forward, her sword held high. The resulting clash of steel rings out across the training grounds, the sheer force of her blow sending sparks flying as he struggles to hold his ground. She lets out a soft laugh, surprised that he managed to stop her full-force attack. He grins back, panting, acknowledging to himself the incredible power he just faced, a force so intimidating it sent a chill down his spine. Before he can fully recover, she swings again with a mighty overhead blow. A look of shock crosses his face as he realizes his hands have gone numb from the first impact alone. He grits his teeth and barely manages to raise his twin blades in time, blocking the strike just inches from his face. The onslaught is relentless. He is forced onto the defensive, parrying a flurry of strikes and marveling at how she wields her heavy sword as if it were a mere twig. Under the crushing weight of her attacks, he feels as though he's holding back a giant boulder. He wonders if this immense pressure is the result of her body-strengthening training. Ophelia, in turn, senses something unusual about his defense, a strange heaviness to the impact. She exhales, a small smile on her lips. She had assumed this duel would be over in an instant, considering he had been on the defensive the entire time, yet he continues to hold on. Catching his breath, a determined smile on his bruised face, he listens as she admits he is the first person to ever endure her assault for so long. He acknowledges her comment, adding with a grimace that he is surprised to find himself enjoying the challenge this much. He shifts his weight, raising his twin blades once more. He asks if that was the extent of her attack, declaring that while his entire body is screaming in protest, he is still full of energy. Amused by his defiance, Ophelia grips her sword, ready for the next round. In response to his defiance, Ophelia's grin widens. She announces her intent to use her ultimate skill, the full-body sword strike known as Ophelia Print, which can shatter anything. She dares him to try and receive it. She leaps high and unleashes a furious, swirling attack, shouting its name, Storm Breaker. The vortex of energy descends upon Ludwig, who grits his teeth and braces for the overwhelming impact. The blast throws him to the ground. Ophelia lands, her confidence shaken. She knows the skill should have incapacitated him for at least 2 turns, but to her astonishment, he is already pushing himself up from the dirt. Before Ophelia can process his resilience, a new combatant, a girl with short dark hair and glasses, charges in, striking her across the face with his sword's pommel before sweeping her legs out from under her. She presses the advantage, pinning the stunned Ophelia to the ground with her leg and holding a blade to her throat. "It's our win," the girl declares fiercely. As his ally secures their apparent victory, Ludwig cries out as the delayed pain from Ophelia's attack finally hits him. Suddenly, a warm light envelopes him as a gentle voice casts extra heal. He looks up into the serene face of the saint, who kneels beside him and asks how he is feeling. Stunned, Ludwig can only ask why she, of all people, would help him. She smiles gently, explaining that she just happened to be nearby. After Ludwig thanks her for the healing magic, she suggests they should probably deal with the other situation, gesturing toward the pinned Ophelia. The implication of the saint's words strikes the dark-haired girl. She looks over in shock, shouting for them to wait. But it's too late. Ophelia stands free, a smug look on her face. The girl rushes to Ludwig's side, asking if he's all right. She confirms the saint healed him, then eyes him suspiciously, asking if this intervention was their plan from the start. He grits his teeth, thinking that the duel should have already concluded with a single successful blow from him. Beside him, Ilsa looks on with concern, asking aloud if they are now facing a 2-on-1 fight. In response, he addresses Ophelia directly, reminding her that he did offer to fight 2-on-1 with Ilsa if she lacked confidence. He then turns to his maid, instructing her to aim for an opening he will create. A flustered Ilsa agrees, promising to hold on as best she can. This declaration immediately draws murmurs of disapproval from the crowd. One student shouts out, questioning the fairness of a 2-on-1 duel against Ophelia and calling it a cowardly, dirty tactic to involve an attendant. Before anyone else can speak, Ophelia whirls on the crowd, roaring for silence. She proclaims that she acknowledged the 2-on-1 terms from the very beginning and that Ludwig won the match according to the rules. She furiously demands to know if they intend to tarnish their honorable victory and warns them not to interfere. Her fierce outburst stuns the onlookers into silence. Ophelia sighs, lamenting that the constant interference has ruined the fight. Ludwig turns to Ilsa and praises her for doing a great job, but she is overcome with guilt, confessing that she said something terrible to her master. He gently tells her not to worry about it, asking if she has accepted his apology. Nearby, Ophelia gives a slight bow of her head, a silent acknowledgement of her own part in the chaotic turn of events. Ophelia states that she will believe his words are sincere, since he did stop her sword. She warns, however, that the others present do not feel the same. Ludwig agrees, dismissing the dirty orc insult as something he never cared about. His attention then shifts, and he points into the crowd, calling out for Quirce. The one he calls for is already in motion. Quirce, the girl with glasses, lands a swift kick, knocking a young man to the ground. She identifies her target as Thomas, one of Sophia's attendants. With Thomas subdued, Ophelia looms over him, the tip of her sword resting near his throat. She interrogates him, reminding him of his plot to frame Ludwig on the night of the ball. As Thomas stammers in terror, she presses him for a swift answer. His terrified silence is all the confirmation she needs. Ophelia concludes that he must be the one who spread the rumor about her and asks if he accepts this accusation. As Thomas frantically denies it, she clenches her jaw in frustration. At that moment, Sophia arrives on the scene, innocently asking if something is the matter. She speaks about the matter concerning Thomas, suggesting that while he acted out of ignorance, his rudeness must be punished to clear the name of the Belga kingdom. Ophelia, however, cuts in with a sharp question, asking if Sophia is suggesting they should simply execute him on the spot. The bound attendant, Thomas, looks up in shock at Ophelia. He then cries out that he did it all for her sake. Ophelia looks down at him, her expression unreadable as she questions his claim. His shock is palpable. Ophelia turns to Ludwig, explaining that the person most insulted by Thomas's actions was Ludwig's own attendant, Ilsa. Therefore, she reasons, the decision on how to punish him should fall to Ludwig. He looks back at her, flustered, asking if she is truly leaving such a heavy decision to him. He steels himself, turning his attention to Thomas. Ludwig declares that as the crown prince of this nation, he cannot forgive what has been done. He is keenly aware that the other students are watching them all. Beside him, Quirce wonders if he is about to pass judgment himself. He continues, addressing the crowd. He clarifies that he will not be the one to pass judgment. Rather, he believes this is a matter for the laws of the Baldburg Empire. With finality, he announces that the entire affair will be entrusted to the judiciary. His declaration sends a ripple through the onlookers. Solveig watches with a stern expression. Ludwig realizes that by making the investigation non-public, the details of Thomas's actions will not leak out to the Belga kingdom. As the crowd processes this, Ophelia speaks up, telling them to look closely. She points out her attendant, Quirce, and reminds everyone that there are many attendants just like Thomas. She states that the events at the ball were a result of the attendants' own wishes, and now they must face the consequences. Her words hang in the air. Ludwig glances over his shoulder, his eyes widening in surprise as he spots Sophia standing amongst the students. He looks at her, a question in his eyes. In response, Sophia offers him a small, encouraging smile and a slight nod. As he watches her, Ophelia steps forward with a grin. She declares that she will now take him on, explaining that while she may have been a letdown as Ophelia, she will now show him the true form of Ludwig von Baldburg. With her challenge delivered, she turned and strode away, waving a cheerful, dismissive hand over her shoulder without a backward glance. As the crowd of students watched her depart, Ludwig stared after her, a bead of sweat on his temple. He cursed inwardly, frustrated that for a simple, muscle-brained heroine, she was undeniably cool. At an outdoor table, Ophelia fixes Ludwig with an intense gaze, demanding to know if he will finally join her for training. Visibly stressed, Ludwig reluctantly agrees. He then suggests that perhaps they should eat separately from now on. Ophelia reacts with shock, questioning why even Ilsa is being so cold to her. She protests that she can't eat slowly, even if she wanted to. Her expression hardens into a fierce scowl. She reflects internally that no one would ever believe this was the true face of the so-called Mad Princess Knight. Being a clumsy, murderous knight was one thing, but today was particularly trying. Suddenly, the saint appears, wrapping her arms around Ludwig from behind and cheerfully asking if she can go into town with him. Her two holy knights rush forward, shouting for her to get away from the saint. Ilsa, looking thoroughly annoyed, asks Ludwig if they should just abandon this chaotic group. She playfully dismisses her guards, remarking that both Baptista and Ilsa are being difficult. Turning her full attention to Ludwig, she announces that she has a favor to ask of His Highness. The saint explains her request. She needs his cooperation for a soup kitchen the church is sponsoring for the commoners of the Baldburg Empire. Ludwig considers it, acknowledging that as the crown prince, it is his duty to help. Ophelia chimes in, agreeing that cooperating with the saint is a good idea. With their encouragement, Ludwig accepts. His agreement brings a bright smile to the saint's face. She claps her hands together, thanking him profusely on behalf of the empire and expressing her gratitude for his help. Ludwig smiles back, assuring her he is happy to assist. The scene shifts to a bustling town square, where commoners mill about between timber-framed buildings, setting the stage for the charitable event. Within the crowd, Quirce stands atop a crate, directing people to form a line. Nearby, The Holy Knight Baptista carries a large crate, instructing the citizens that the back of the line is over there and assuring them there is enough for everyone. At the serving table, Ludwig looks panicked as a large, gruff man snatches a bowl of soup from his hands. In the background, Ophelia observes his struggle and asks what's wrong, as Ludwig finds himself completely overwhelmed by the task. He reflects on the suffering within the empire, concluding that it's an unavoidable consequence of the war declared against the principality. The resulting military expansion, he realizes, has placed a heavy burden on the common folk. His thoughts are interrupted by Ophelia, who asks if he is all right. She expresses her firm belief that with him, Prince Ludwig, leading the way, the country can move in a better direction. He chuckles softly to himself, a newfound resolve in his eyes. With Ophelia pushing him forward, he thinks perhaps even he can accomplish something meaningful. Nearby, the saint smiles benevolently at a group of children, having made them aware of the empire's true plight and expressing her gratitude to the two of them. Suddenly, the Holy Knight Baptista seizes Ludwig's arm, insisting he help them for a while. Startet, Ludwig protests. He wrenches his arm free, demanding to know why the knight is trying to resist him. Ludwig insists he has to serve soup and has no time for this. Baptista, flustered, denies that he is doing anything of the sort. The knight storms away in a clatter of armor, only to turn back with a boisterous laugh. He tells them to come find him when the soup kitchen is finished, leaving Ludwig and Ophelia confused by his strange behavior. Later, as they walk through the town, Ludwig suggests that Ilsa can wait for him elsewhere. She firmly refuses, stating that she would never leave Lord Ludwig to face this alone. Their progress is halted when Baptista calls out from ahead, remarking that he kept them waiting. He then questions why Ludwig's retainers are accompanying him and what business they could possibly have there. The knight stands firm, arms crossed, declaring that this is a matter concerning the saint. Ludwig glares, thinking to himself how unpleasant Baptista's attitude remains. He points an armored finger directly at the prince, addressing him by his full name, Ludwig von Baldburg. He proclaims that the saint bears a mission to guide the Western countries, and an existence like Ludwig's is nothing but an obstacle. The Minerva Church, to which the saint belongs, is a massive religious organization active throughout the Western countries, undertaking efforts that even entire nations cannot match. He stands firm against the knight's accusation, stating that if he gets involved and is injured, it is his own responsibility. He declares that the decision is his to make, not the saint's, and that he has no intention of keeping his distance from her. He dismisses the knight, noting that after seeing the saint again today, he no longer believes she is some sort of scheming vixen. With a sharp look, he asks if that is all the knight has to say, because if so, he is leaving. The Holy Knight roars in fury, proclaiming that the saint is the one who will save this chaotic world, a sacred being meant to guide all the people born of Minerva. The confrontation having concluded, a young man with light, reddish-blonde hair approaches Ludwig and Ilsa. He introduces himself as Marco, remarking that it's unexpected for Ludwig to declare he won't keep his distance from the saint. When Ludwig asks what he means, Marco simply smiles and says it means exactly what it sounds like. His peers' words catch him off guard. He had assumed Marco would also be against his association with the saint. Shaking off his surprise, he turns to Ilsa and tells her it's time to go, and she readily agrees. After leaving the main square, they arrive at an empty market stall. Ludwig turns to Ilsa and sincerely thanks her for her help that day. She blushes, insisting that it is only natural for her to assist him. Ludwig smiles, realizing that properly conveying these feelings of gratitude is crucial. It is the accumulation of such small acts that will help him avoid a ruinous end. His resolve strengthened, he quickly tells Ilsa to wait for him, explaining that he is going to help with the cleanup for a bit before running off. Meanwhile, Ophelia reports to the saint, who expresses her gratitude for the cooperation at the soup kitchen. The saint then adds that she apologizes for not accepting Ilsa's pressure. When Ophelia asks what she means, the saint claims she thought Ilsa wanted to offer thanks on Ludwig's behalf. Ophelia is left to wonder what kind of game the saint is playing. In a sunlit corridor, Leon Faux Bartfort speaks with the saint, a warm smile on his face. He expresses that with the church now involved, he feels their support is almost embarrassingly generous. The saint, equally cheerful, dismisses his concern, adding that she thinks Lord Ludwig is wonderful. As they continue walking, she explains that it's quite common to leave matters to the church, noting that they handle similar situations, including burnings, in the Western countries. Leon seems surprised by this information, simply asking if that is so, to which she affirms. Finding a suitable spot, the saint spreads a cloth on the floor. Seeing this, Leon gestures towards it, suggesting that there is no reason for them to remain standing. Now seated, he thanks her before changing the subject, apologizing on behalf of Baptista for his extreme rudeness. The saint demurs, claiming it's not true, but her downcast eyes suggest otherwise. Internally, Leon congratulates himself, thinking he was right to have read those how-to guide for women. His confidence leads him to suddenly grasp her hands. The saint flinches, pleading for him to stop, while Leon's own face contorts in shock at her unexpectedly strong reaction. He tightens his grip, his expression shifting to one of fierce defense as he insists that she has done nothing wrong. She looks up at him, her eyes filling with tears as if moved by his declaration. Leaning closer, he tells her that he has no intention of keeping his distance and asks if she will invite him to meet again. He adds that next time, he won't be able to imitate a heroine being plunged into despair. The saint's face is flushed, tears now streaming down her cheeks. She collects herself with a small laugh, agreeing to his request and wiping a tear away. As they shake hands on it, Leon is startled by the unexpected strength in her grip. Her gentle demeanor vanishes instantly. Leaning in with a cold, menacing gaze, the saint reveals she has been observing him, viewing him as a demon who tramples all the women of this world. She then demands to know what he intends to do. The accusation leaves Leon utterly stunned. Sweat beads on his face as his eyes widen in horror. He stammers, asking if she truly intends to lead the world to ruin. He flinches as the saint, her eyes narrowing with cold intensity, flatly denies having any such malicious intentions. Her hand rests on the table between them as she observes that he does not appear to be lying. Her demeanor then shifts in an instant, a bright, cheerful smile replacing her previous coldness as she declares her belief in him. The sudden change leaves Leon bewildered, his mind reeling as he considers her surprisingly powerful grip, so unlike that of a typical heroine. A month passes. While training outdoors, Leon finds his thoughts drifting to the saint, wondering if she is well. Nearby, Livia brings a drink to Ophelia and Ilsa, explaining the saint's whereabouts. She has been dispatched to the Borgonia kingdom, the westernmost of the Western nations, at the request of the Minerva Church to treat an illness of unknown origin. The nature of this mission is uniquely perilous. In this world, healing magic functions by activating a person's life force. This very principle means it also invigorates any harmful bacteria or viruses within the body, rendering it ineffective against sickness. Even for an expert in restorative magic like the saint, providing aid would be incredibly difficult. Despite this grim reality, Livia expresses her concern for the saint. Ophelia confidently reassures her that the saint will undoubtedly save many people. Livia agrees, adding that Ludwig has no reason to worry either, as Leon listens intently to their exchange. She acknowledges that worrying is natural, but concludes that their only course of action is to pray for the saint's safe return and be ready to welcome her back with smiles. Leon, holding his cup, agrees wholeheartedly. 2 weeks later, however, their hopes are shattered. Leon, Livia, Ophelia, and Quirce stare in disbelief at a report they've just received. The news is dire. The saint herself has been struck down by the very illness she went to combat. The situation is critical. A report from the Holy Knight Baptista details the grim scene. The saint lies in bed, racked by a high fever, her life hanging in the balance. He explains that the number of patients grows daily with no effective treatment, and formally requests support from both the Bulburg Empire and the Printemps Federation through Lord Ludwig. Faced with this desperate news, Livia turns to Leon, asking what he will do. His expression hardens with resolve as he utters a single name, Natalia. He recalled his initial assessment of Natalia Silvestri, the so-called scheming saint. She acted flirtatious and had a poor relationship with Ilsa, all while trying to put on a show of being a true saint. To him, she was nothing more than an annoyance. Stealing his resolve, he decided to use all the knowledge from his past life to save the true saint. He would go to the Borgonia kingdom himself and assess the situation. He turned to Livia, explaining that even Marco seemed unsure of what specific support to request. Without a clear justification, he couldn't properly submit a request for aid to the Empire. Livia, distraught at the thought of anything happening to Louis, insisted that she would go alone to confirm the situation, but he firmly refused. Before Livia could protest, Ophelia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, telling her she understood. She knowingly remarked that this was just how Ludwig operated. Leon, his mind already on logistics, noted that the Borgonia kingdom was far. He declared their intention to use a portal, a magical item that could facilitate instantaneous long-distance travel by channeling magical power. He explained the complication to Ophelia. Portals were installed in the capitals of each nation but required diplomatic relations for use. He questioned her about the current diplomatic status with Borgonia. A solution quickly came to him. Even without direct relations, they could use the Printemps kingdom as a waypoint. Ophelia confirmed that this was indeed possible. With the plan set, he turned, calling out his thanks to Ilsa and asking her to begin the procedures to authorize their use of the portal. Meanwhile, Ophelia addressed the others. She told Livia to leave things to her and then asked Quirce to join them as well, declaring that they would all accompany Ludwig to the Borgonia kingdom. Quirce readily agreed. Her declaration was met with a firm clasp of hands, a silent pact. Ophelia noted that she had anticipated this outcome, expressing her understanding. With his companions united behind him, Leon gave the command. They would head for the Borgonia kingdom. Ophelia added a detail about their travel arrangements, explaining that while a portal existed at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they had applied for permission to use the one within the imperial palace itself. She praised his cleverness as a carriage awaited them. He explains to Ophelia that seeking official permission through the Foreign Affairs Bureau is unlikely to succeed. Therefore, he intends to leverage his connection to the imperial family, applying his own selfish desires to the situation. He stresses the importance of keeping their group small to minimize the number of people who will be held responsible for their actions. In response, she acknowledges the potential danger, noting the risk of bringing an unknown disease back to the capital. Her words hang in the air as they step into a vast chamber, the centerpiece of which is a large, circular platform inscribed with glowing runes, the portal. Leon confirms that this is the portal reserved for the imperial family's use. Ilsa, having moved with remarkable speed, announces that the magical connection has been established. Ophelia expresses her admiration for the maid's efficiency, and Leon adds that all that remains is for them to supply the magical energy needed for the teleportation. As they prepare, Ophelia brings up a critical point. The imperial portal is strictly forbidden to anyone who is not a citizen of the Empire. A rule, she notes, is being ignored. The sudden realization strikes Leon, whose eyes widen in shock. He frantically tries to recall a detail, wondering if this was part of some orc counterattack scenario he had forgotten. He quickly dismisses his confusion, thanking Ilsa for completing the preparations. His expression hardens with resolve. With Livia, Ophelia, and Quirce standing by his side, he silently vows to reach the saint, no matter the obstacle. Leon, Ophelia, Ilsa, and a short-haired companion stare forward, their faces a mixture of shock and grim resolve amidst the surrounding chaos. Their expressions are a reaction to the scene before them. A makeshift triage center in a courtyard, littered with debris and hastily erected tents, a testament to a recent disaster. As they walk through the camp, passing by the weary and injured, Leon asks for the saint's whereabouts. His short-haired companion informs him that she is in a nearby building, tending to the afflicted. Inside one of the rooms, Natalia lies in bed, moaning in agony. Her face is flushed with fever and stained with blood, her body trembling before her eyes snap open in a moment of pained awareness. The group enters her room to find a man sitting vigil. Ophelia addresses him as Lord Ludwig, revealing the familiar figure who now possesses a much leaner, more weary physique. He looks up, acknowledging their arrival. Leon wastes no time, his voice tight with worry as he asks about Natalia's condition. Ludwig's expression immediately darkens, his gaze falling in sorrow. He confirms their fears, stating that her symptoms are severe. He then adds that the knight, Baptista, has also contracted the same mysterious illness and is being treated in another room. Rising from his chair, Ludwig suggests they step outside to discuss the details further. As he moves toward the door, he reveals the nature of the affliction, petrification. He explains the horrifying truth of the plague. It began 2 months ago, spreading explosively, and causes the victim's skin to slowly turn to stone until they die. With the town's population nearly entirely afflicted, he warns that the country is doomed if it reaches the capital. Ophelia turns to Leon, asking what he will do. Before an answer can be given, Ludwig excuses himself with a strained smile. He says he must go and help Baptista, asking the group to wait for him as he departs. He looks down at a small, lumpy stone that has just fallen from Marco's pocket. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the grotesque object. Marco turns towards him with a faint, knowing smile. Behind them, Ilsa looks on with concern, questioning her master's sudden change in demeanor. He then addresses the entire group, asking if it would be possible to see the saint one more time, acknowledging that it is an imposition. Ignoring the request, Leon moves decisively toward a nearby door. Ilsa calls out, trying to stop him, but he pushes forward, reassuring her that it's all right. He enters to find Natalia lying in bed, her breathing shallow and dark, vein-like marks spreading across her face. She weakly calls out Ludwig's name, apologizing for her pitiful state. A grim realization dawns on Leon. He has seen this before. His mind flashes back to the events of the game he once played. He recalls Natalia's confession after being cornered at the Holy Church, where she admitted she was not the saint, but merely a worthless girl named Natalia, a substitute for the protagonist. The memory continues, recounting how the poor farmer's daughter was discovered by the church and made into the saint. Overwhelmed by the pressure, she offered her body to the demon Diabolos, ensuring no happy event would ever await her. Back in the present, he tells the ailing Natalia that he is simply trying to survive in this world that seems to offer nothing but bad endings. She weakly replies, telling him not to be so pitiful. Tears well in her eyes as she explains that she always tried her best as the saint, even rushing to the aid of the Borgonia kingdom without hesitation. She confesses that all this time, she had wanted to help him. Her hand clasps his. She insists she is not the saint, but Natalia Silvestri. With a tear falling, she makes a final plea, for him to save the country in her stead and to leave the rest to her. Carrying the afflicted Natalia, Leon rushes towards an inn. His maid, Ilsa, tries to stop him, insisting they wash up before entering, but he pushes past with a determined look, offering only a curt apology for his rudeness. He continues forward, trying to reassure the worried Ilsa. He tells her not to worry and asks that she, along with Ophelia and Quirce, listen to him calmly. With intense focus, he reveals a startling truth. The petrification is not an illness. It is the work of an object known as the dragon's demonic core. He recalls how, in the world of the game he knew, petrification was simply one of several status ailments that could affect a person. His explanation is met with immediate skepticism from Ophelia, who questions if such a thing could possibly exist. Leon confirms that he read about it in documents at the Imperial Palace, admitting that while it sounds like a lie, the item is undoubtedly real. He elaborates that the dragon's demonic core was an item added to the game to help players overcome a particularly difficult battle. He reasons that if a nation were to use it as a weapon during an invasion, it would grant them a massive tactical advantage. The method of its deployment is terrifyingly simple. If the core is placed in a water source, such as a well, anyone who comes into contact with the magically tainted water will eventually turn to stone. Just then, the short-haired warrior presents a possible solution. She reveals there is a way to save the petrified, an item called an absorption stone, which is being traded by merchants from the Bulberg Empire. The news shocks Leon, who realizes that with so many citizens afflicted, securing enough of the stones will be an immense challenge. Despite the daunting task, he rallies his companions with newfound resolve. He declares that they know what must be done: secure the absorption stones and find the dragon's demonic core. His allies immediately voice their agreement, ready to take action. Meanwhile, in a grand throne room within the Bulberg Empire, Gotthard von Bulberg muses on the Borgonia kingdom's sudden need for a large quantity of absorption stones. He notes that acquiring them would be impossible without the White King's cooperation, a negotiation that, he reveals, Ophelia's father is currently undertaking. Meanwhile, Leon passionately argued his case before the imperial court. The foundation of diplomacy, he insisted, was to befriend neighboring countries while isolating those further away. He pressed on, explaining that if the empire were to extend a favor now, it would prove immensely beneficial in the long run. The official listening to him could only stare, wide-eyed and aghast at the proposal. But the emperor, Gotthard von Bulberg, reacted not with shock, but with booming laughter. Surprised that his son could be so clever, he gave his consent, telling the boy to do as he pleased. Overjoyed, Leon thanked him profusely, having secured the emperor's approval. As he walked away from the throne room with Ilsa, he confirmed that everything had gone smoothly. She, however, looked worried, asking if he intended to inform the Minerva Holy Church or the Borgonia Kingdom. He replied that it was still too early for that. He elaborated on his caution, explaining that they still didn't know who was responsible for placing the dragon's demonic core. If information were to leak to the culprit, he reasoned, they might flee before they could be caught. The cat-eared attendant approached them as Leon continued, stating that with the Empire and the Prince United Kingdom aligned, they could secure a sufficient number of absorption stones. He noted that while obtaining the stones wasn't the hard part, saving someone named Polka would be a time-consuming process. Hearing this, Ilsa gently took his hand, apologizing that he had to fall ill. She reminded him that he was the only one who had offered help to Polka, a person abandoned even by the Minerva Holy Church. His actions, she insisted, would give hope to countless others. Leon was taken aback by her words. She looked at him, her expression filled with earnest emotion. She formally introduced herself as Ilsa Hildebrand, declaring that she was proud to have served him and to have witnessed his character firsthand. Her declaration struck a chord within him. A determined smile spread across his face as he thanked her. He asked her to keep watching him, promising that he would absolutely save Polka. Later, in a grand hall with Ophelia and another female warrior, Leon held up an absorption stone. He turned to Ilsa with a request to deliver this stone to the saintess. He explained that placing it in her mouth should be enough to cure the petrification. With a grim look, he vowed to make the culprits pay for their actions, and Ilsa accepted her mission with quiet resolve. He leans in close to his maid, Ilsa, whispering a clandestine instruction. He wants her to sneak into the quarters of Marco and Baptista. She responds with a confident, knowing smile, holding the absorption stone. Understanding the task, she assures him that he can leave it to her. He smiles warmly, telling Ilsa that she has always been, and will always be, his only maid. Visibly moved, she declares her eternal devotion to him. With that settled, he turns his attention to Ophelia and Quirce, announcing that it is now his turn and he has a favor to ask of them. His plan brings them to the edge of a murky pond. Ophelia questions his intentions, noting that this is where Polka's living water is being used. Quirce adds that there's a demon within the pond. Leon confirms her assessment, explaining that to retrieve the demon's core, they must search the entire bottom of the vast pond. He believes that with enough absorption stones, they can destroy it repeatedly. Without hesitation, Leon dives into the water. Ophelia cries out that entering the most polluted part of the pond is a suicidal act, even with an absorption stone. As he descends, Leon reflects that he can hold his breath for 5 minutes, confident that his training to escape the sea kelpie will prove useful. Ilsa watches on, unconcerned. He surfaces, explaining to a shocked Ophelia that he is a filthy orc. He claims that despite his appearance, he weighs 300 kilograms and cannot float, making it impossible to properly search the deep bottom of the pond. He then turns to the short-haired girl, a rope now tied around his torso. He states that his survival now depends on them. Just as he gave Ilsa a mission to save a life, he is now entrusting his own lifeline to them. Her expression darkens with understanding. If he stops breathing, they're to use the rope as a signal to find the stone dragon's core. Her resolve hardens into a furious shout. She, Ophelia, will absolutely not let him die. If he dares to, she will scold him for it. From off-panel, Leon pleads with her to stop, insisting it's bad luck. With that, he bites down on a stone and plunges back into the depths. As the water splashes, Ophelia calls out to Lord Ludwig, urging him to be careful and wishing him good fortune. She held the rope, waiting as below the surface, Leon descended. The water was vast and dark, but his immediate concern was the absorption stone he held. Its petrification effect was progressing far faster than anticipated. He realized with a jolt that if he touched the demon's corpse directly, he would be completely turned to stone. He pushed the thought aside, planting his feet firmly on the pond floor. There was no time to worry about it now. His resolve was rewarded as a faint glow pierced the gloom ahead. It was the stone dragon's magic core. He reached for it, but his body suddenly stiffened, refusing to move. The absorption stone's power wasn't enough to keep up. Realizing he had only one option, he steeled himself. This was it. With a great, silent roar, he lunged forward and seized the glowing core. His fate was now in the hands of the two waiting above. He could only trust they would pull him up. On the surface, Ophelia and Quirce watched the rope with growing dread. Ophelia cursed Ludwig under her breath, calling him a fool, while Quirce cried out his name in panic. As the core rolled from his grasp, Leon felt a sense of victory. He had won his bet. Above, Ophelia's voice was sharp with urgency. She ordered Quirce to give all the absorption stones to Ludwig, and to do it quickly. The petrification surged over him, a cold, hard shell encasing his body and stealing his voice. He was pulled from the water, completely covered in the rocky substance. Inside, he could barely move. Ludwig, now present, looked at the mass of stone and asked Ophelia if this was too much to handle. Leon, trapped, could only watch. In a startling move, Ophelia leaned in close, her expression one of fierce determination, and bit down hard on Leon's petrified neck. Having just arrived, Ludwig wipes his face with a cloth, a relieved smile on his face. He apologizes to the short-haired girl beside him, admitting that he had been worried. In the background, Ilsa stands watching. The scene shifts to Ilsa, standing alone in a clearing under the night sky, surrounded by glowing motes of light. She calls out Ludwig's name with uncertainty, her expression filled with concern. Her voice reaches Ludwig, who freezes in panic. He realizes with dread that Ilsa has returned at the worst possible moment, finding him with Ophelia and the petrified Leon. Ilsa runs toward them, calling out his name and demanding to know what has happened. Before he can respond, Ophelia bluntly begins to explain that Ludwig entered the pond to retrieve the stone dragon's core. Ludwig stares, aghast at her straightforwardness. The explanation devastates Ilsa. Tears stream down her face as she looks at Ludwig, her voice trembling as she asks why he would want to cause her so much distress. He stammers, trying to downplay Ophelia's words, but Ilsa presses on, pleading with him not to do something like this ever again. His resolve hardening, Ludwig pulls the distraught maid into a firm embrace. He looks down at her and makes a solemn vow. This will be the last time he ever makes her worry. Beneath the crescent moon, a quiet apology hangs in the night air. With a determined pout, Ilsa vows that she will never again leave Louis' side. Leon, relieved, asks if she's all right. Ilsa brightly dismisses his concern, insisting that he should worry about himself instead of her. He then asks what will become of the now petrified saintess. A sinister smile spreads across Ilsa's face as she tells him to leave it to her, promising to grant the saintess a death steeped in despair. Leon laughs nervously, asking her not to overdo it. Watching from a distance, Ophelia is aghast, wondering if Rutwia truly has the eyes of a criminal. Leon turns to her, stating that the identity of the culprit isn't clear yet. Ophelia seems to reluctantly agree. Her composure breaks as she slams a gloved fist onto a nearby surface. Quirce calls out her name in surprise. She erupts in fury, vowing to crush the perpetrator. As Leon and Ilsa watch, startled, Quirce explains that the culprit angered Ophelia in a way they shouldn't have. Later, in the woods, a glowing Marco appears before them. Ilsa questions why he has come, while Leon internally wonders if the saintess's petrification is truly a good thing. Marco smiles, saying he was worried. Ophelia, however, is confused, identifying him as a holy knight of the church who should be their ally. His gaze falls upon the widespread destruction. Leon realizes that while the stone dragon's magic core was powerful enough to petrify the saintess and affect the entire city, it is unnatural that Marco alone remains completely unharmed. He stares at the glowing knight, his voice ringing with certainty as he declares that the culprits behind this series of events are from the Minerva Holy Church. Ophelia reels from the accusation, her mind struggling to comprehend it. She demands to know why the Holy Church would target the Borgonia kingdom, and more than that, why they would harm the saintess, a symbol of their own faith. The reason for such a betrayal is beyond her understanding. In response, Leon explains that while the saintess is real, there are corrupt elements within the church. He reveals that according to the old game's lore, the Mileburg Empire and the Minerva Holy Church were connected, with a key figure involved in a plot to capture the saintess. He names this figure as Lorenzo Maltini, the archbishop of the Minerva Holy Church, who is depicted with a self-satisfied grin. Marco listens nearby, his expression unreadable. He continues, clarifying that for Archbishop Lorenzo, who desires to control the Minerva Holy Church, the saintess's very existence and her popularity among the people are nothing more than an obstacle to his ambitions. His voice rises to a shout as he declares they will force the captured prisoner from the Borgonia kingdom to confess the entire conspiracy. Behind him, Ophelia, Ilsa, Quirce, and another knight stand ready for battle as their captive roars in defiance. Suddenly, the holy knight Baptista lunges forward, his sword clashing violently with Leon's. Enraged, Baptista demands to know what Leon meant by his earlier words, questioning how he could claim that Baptista himself had changed the Saintess. He presses his attack, refusing to believe such a thing. Leon parries, asking if Baptista truly doesn't understand. He claims to have witnessed the Saintess's true nature, seeing her selfish and wicked personality firsthand, a sight he never expected to encounter. Their duel continues in the dark woods. Baptista shouts at Leon, questioning his actions. He declares that while one is free to worship demons, they must not be discovered. With a smirk, Leon asks if Baptista was peeking at the Saintess. The accusation catches the knight off guard, and he sputters in rage. He vehemently denies it, proclaiming that he is in a position to protect the Saintess and that it is a follower's duty to watch over her 24 hours a day. Leon mockingly labels him a perverted stalker. Just then, a voice calls out to Baptista. Annoyed by the interruption, the knight clicks his tongue and tells Leon they are withdrawing for now, beginning to pull away from the fight. As he retreats, Marco appears and confirms that they are leaving. Baptista glares back at Leon with pure hatred, vowing that their next meeting will be his last and cursing him as a filthy orc. Leon simply watches them go, a confident smirk on his face. He turns to leave, but Ophelia rushes forward, demanding to know if he intends to flee. With a raised hand, he cuts her off, stating simply that they are not to follow him. Having left them behind, he pauses in the woods, reflecting that he now understands the nature of the plot. All that remains, he believes, is to report his findings to the Borgonia Kingdom and the Minerva Holy Church to resolve everything. He wonders if it will truly be that simple. He soon finds the Saintess, who is accompanied by Ilsa. He asks if she's all right, and she quietly acknowledges his presence. He then informs her that, following Rutwia's instructions, he will ensure she is not stalked by her two pursuers. She expresses her gratitude, explaining that she has recovered thanks to the protection stone that Rutwia provided. The Saintess then mentions hearing about the confrontation with Baptista, finding it odd that such a devout man would be angered by her worship of the demon Diabolo. With tears in her eyes, she laments that even Rutwia must find her repulsive now. He immediately dismisses her fears, questioning why he would ever abandon her. He declares that her identity as Natalia Silvestri is all that matters to him. Whether she worships a goddess or a demon is irrelevant. His directness leaves her flustered and speechless, while he internally questions if such a seemingly fragile person could truly be a mastermind. His demeanor shifts dramatically, his face contorting into a fierce grin. He proclaims that together, they will make their enemies suffer, delivering punishment to both the goddess Minerva and the demon Diabolo. The Saintess stares, utterly taken aback by his sudden intensity. Her shock gives way to unrestrained laughter, catching him completely off guard. In the distance, Ilsa, Ophelia, and the other girl observe the bizarre scene with confusion as his face flushes with embarrassment. Later, inside an ornate waiting room in the Borgonia Kingdom, Ilsa stands alone with her thoughts. She hopes the kingdom will heed their petition for aid, but her primary concern is for Ludwig. She reassures herself, however, that he is being looked after. Meanwhile, Ludwig finds himself in an awkward situation on a plush sofa. The Saintess, now quite comfortable with him, playfully offers him a pastry, remarking on how delicious it is. She leans in closer, her smile radiant, and tells him not to worry since only she and Lord Rutwi are present. Her proximity makes him visibly flustered, and he can only think about how close she is. He turns away from the Saintess, flustered, and looks toward his companions for support. He pleads with Ilsa to say something, anything, but she and the others simply stare back with unnerving silence. In response, Ilsa pointedly turns her head away, a clear dismissal that leaves him sputtering in disbelief. Ophelia, meanwhile, sighs with exasperation, remarking that since they've all been summoned together, they should just wait and see what happens. Moments later, a royal attendant enters the waiting room. He announces that preparations are complete and respectfully asks them to proceed to the audience chamber. They are brought before a man seated on a grand throne, who welcomes them as Your Highness Rutwia, Your Highness Ophelia, and the Saintess. He introduces himself as King Daines II of the Borgonia Kingdom. Leon, looking up at the monarch, begins to state his case. He explains that they have secured the 2 dragon magic stones, but the remaining ones are being transported from the Printemps Federation to the Empire. He urgently pleads with the king to make a decision to save the people. The Saintess then adds her own appeal, claiming that while they have no obligation to help, she was moved by a plea from the saint to save the residents and decided to act. She asked for His Majesty's understanding. The king listens, then addresses an older man named Archbishop Ricardo. The archbishop steps forward to report that his investigation into the Minerva Holy Church is complete. He confirms that the church, led by the Saintess, instigated the recent turmoil, a revelation that stuns Leon and his companions. The archbishop continues, asking if Leon intended to accuse the church of a self-serving plot. He then reveals that the import routes for the magic stones are limited, and that the Baldburg Empire purchased them from the Gablot Maritime Kingdom specifically to deliver to the church. Leon's eyes widen in fury at the confirmation, his anger boiling over. Leon declares that the very presence of the so-called saint summoned here, Rutwia's son, is the ultimate proof of the church's deception. The Saintess beside him looks on with a worried expression. The king's expression shifts, acknowledging that he hadn't considered the Printemps Federation was shouldering the burden. Ophelia, however, reacts with sharp anger, demanding to know what is going on. The king looks down upon the kneeling party, his expression unreadable. He tells them that is enough, bidding them to rise. He continues, stating that the current discussion is not about assigning blame. The cause of the affliction has been dealt with by Ludwig's party, and all that remains is to save the people with the magic stones. This, he declares, is the simple truth of the matter. His voice rising with authority, he proclaims there is no time to waste. Without waiting for support from the Bulburg Empire or the Printemps Federation, he commands that the magic stones be given to the citizens of Polka immediately. In response to the royal decree, the armored guards lining the hall snap to attention, acknowledging the order with a unified, resounding cry. As the king's will is made clear, Archbishop Ricardo's face contorts in fury, his scheme utterly thwarted. In contrast, Leon allows himself a small, triumphant smirk. Leaving the throne room, the group is met by a beaming Ilsa. She rushes forward, congratulating Ludwig, exclaiming with joy that he succeeded. They walk down a sunlit corridor, and Leon remarks how fortunate it was that King Daines is a good-natured ruler. He then urges everyone to hurry along. As they walk, Ophelia asks if they are simply going to abandon the conspirators. The short-haired girl beside her doubts the extremist faction would ever admit fault. Nearby, Ilsa praises Ludwig's foresight, noting he must have known the Gablot Maritime Kingdom would reveal the true culprit. Leon simply laughs and thanks her. On the streets of the capital, the king's swift directive has an immediate effect. The distribution of magic stones to the populace begins, getting ahead of the petrification's rapid spread. The saint kneels, using a glowing stone to heal an afflicted citizen. As Leon's group watches, she explains that the Bulburg Empire also purchased a large quantity of the stones, and all that remains is to transport them. The short-haired girl remarks that thanks to Ludwig, Polka has been saved from crisis. As events unfold, Leon and his companions find their path blocked by a line of armored knights. At their head stands Archbishop Ricardo, his expression unyielding. Leon shouts at them to clear the way. The Archbishop, however, ignores the demand. He holds up an official document, his voice ringing with authority as he identifies the sinner, Saint Natalia. With a look of utter disbelief, Natalia watches as he declares her under arrest for the crime of plunging Polka into chaos. Below, Ophelia and her companion move swiftly to restrain the now accused saint. Surrounded by his knights, Archbishop Ricardo raises a hand and issues a command, restrain the saint. Positioned protectively in front of the saint, Livia, and Ophelia, Leon snarls back a defiant refusal. The Archbishop smirks, questioning if Lord Ludwig truly intends to disregard a direct order from King Daines. He continues, reasoning that the saint is the cause of the entire conflict, and that once she is captured and everything is revealed, His Majesty will surely understand. He then asks if they plan to shift the blame onto him and his men. At his words, the saint flinches, her expression twisting in fear. Leon ignores the Archbishop's provocations, turning instead to Ophelia to confirm his suspicion. Ricardo and the Board faction were behind this from the very beginning. He quickly lays out a plan, telling her to take Ilsa and Clarice while he protects the saint and brings her before King Daines. Standing beside Clarice and Livia, Ilsa acknowledges the order. Her agreement is hesitant, however, as she seems to want to say more but trails off, her face etched with worry. He tells them not to worry, reminding them that he is merely a bodyguard and that Ophelia is with them. Shouting a quick later, he turns to face the advancing knights as the women flee. He raises a weapon and unleashes a powerful blast, crying out Stormbreaker. Ophelia glances back, her eyes wide with surprise. Her surprise quickly hardens into resolve. She warns Lord Ludwig that their enemy is strong, insisting that he leave the fighting to her, the group's strongest attacker. In response, Leon flashes a confident grin. A knight with a high ponytail and a scar across his eye clashes with Ophelia, declaring that he will make the saint pay for being the source of their troubles. Leon shouts back, calling the knight a perverted stalker. Nearby, Marco deftly parries an attack, remarking on his opponent's carelessness. Ophelia calls out to Ludwig, asking if he is alright. With a confident smile, Marco presses his advantage, his blade a silver blur as he carves a path through the armored soldiers. The tide of battle suddenly turns as the ponytailed knight gets past Leon's guard, pressing a blade to his throat. Seeing this, Ophelia cries out Marco's name in alarm. His life seemingly in peril, Leon only grins. He mockingly asks the knight if he truly believed they were on the same side, revealing that he was only pretending to be surprised. The knight's shattered helmet and armor lie strewn on the floor around him. Ophelia can only stare, utterly baffled by what has just happened. His allies watch the unfolding chaos, a new understanding dawning on them. Clarice realized that what she had perceived as laziness was, in fact, a constant vigil over the saint, a quiet effort to weed out any threats. She understood now that even the hint about the stone had been a deliberate part of his plan. As they processed this revelation, Leon, still carrying Ophelia, found himself surrounded by knights. He roared a challenge at them, calling them damned orcs and telling them to prepare themselves. Ophelia, however, assessed their grim situation, noting that even with Marco now fighting alongside them, they were still at a severe disadvantage. Just as the situation seemed dire, a familiar figure dashed onto the scene. Ilsa called out to Ludwig, announcing with a determined smile that she had brought reinforcements. He could only stare in surprise, uttering her name as she approached. Meanwhile, another figure arrived, observing the conflict with a serene smile. Flanked by her own retinue of knights, she noted with satisfaction that she had made it in time. She approached Archbishop Ricardo, introducing herself as Agrita Mangione of the Minerva Holy Church. Having heard the story, she questioned the need for a pretext to blame her dear Natalia. Agrita asserted that she possessed evidence of Natalia's innocence and proposed they have a thorough discussion on the matter. Her attention then turned to Ludwig. She addressed him directly, confirming his identity as the crown prince of the Baldburg Empire and asking if Natalia had been of service to him. Ludwig, looking uneasy, could only agree that she had. Later, she confronted Lorenzo Maltini, accusing him of tarnishing the Minerva Holy Church's name by failing to apprehend the culprits. She stated that his incompetence had caused her considerable trouble. Lorenzo could only look down in defeat, acknowledging her words. She smiled sweetly, suggesting that since they were all present, it was the perfect opportunity to clarify everything. Agrita then put the question to Lorenzo directly, asking if he wished to explain himself. The archbishop remained silent, his expression a mixture of anger and frustration. Seeing his hesitation, Agrita remarked that he must be too ashamed to speak. With a knowing look, she offered to speak in his stead, promising to detail the crimes he had committed. She began her explanation, focusing on the acquisition of the magic core of the stone dragon. Agrita revealed that the Belga kingdom had purchased the item and pointedly added that this kingdom was Sophia's homeland. The implication was clear. A connection existed between Lorenzo and the Belga kingdom. King Dain's 2 steps forward, his voice ringing with authority. He announces that he will explain the connection between the two parties, then turns his head slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes as he notes that the archbishop came with him. He then reveals a state secret. His mother, the second princess of the former Borgonia kingdom, was originally from the Belga kingdom. He confesses that the nobles, including Ricardo, supported his mother, and it was only through the power of this faction that he was able to ascend to the throne. As the king speaks, Agrita leans close to Leon, whispering with a sly smile. She remarks that Lorenzo and Ricardo seem to be quite close, adding that they discovered a great number of letters in Lorenzo's mansion that prove it. Leon's eyes widen in shock at the confirmation, his voice rising to a furious shout. King Dain's too condemns the Minerva Holy Church and the Baldburg Empire for their conspiracy, which has caused immense suffering to the people of Borga. Declaring their actions unforgivable, he orders Ricardo and everyone in the royal capital to be taken into custody. The archbishop recoils, sweating and stammering that it's a conspiracy. Amidst the political upheaval, Leon grits his teeth, frustrated that the confrontation is over. His thoughts are interrupted as the disgraced knight, Baptista, stumbles toward him, seething with rage and accusing Leon of being responsible for his downfall. His face a mask of fury, Baptista raises a glass jar containing a grotesque, single-eyed creature. Screaming the saint's name, he smashes the container on the ground, freeing the entity within. Instantly, the creature latches onto him. Dark tentacles erupt and coil around his body, merging with his armor. Baptista screams in agony as his eyes turn black. The creature's will overwhelming his own as it claims him. Seeing the horrific transformation, Leon yells for everyone to get away. The monstrous tentacles lash out violently, spreading across the courtyard toward the terrified crowd. He draws 2 short swords, crossing them defensively. Beside him, a shocked Ophelia asks if he knows what that creature is. The creature is identified as an evil roper. It is an extremely malevolent monster whose secreted mucus can dissolve clothing and also has a potent aphrodisiac effect. As the monstrous form of Baptista arrives, Agrita watches with a placid smile, remarking on the interesting turn of events. The saint beside her seems to understand the situation as well. Leon, however, sees the grave danger and turns to Ilsa, noting how serious this is. Marco steps forward, declaring that he and Leon will handle the creature and ordering everyone else to fall back. He draws his sword, muttering that he has no choice. Beside him, Leon braces himself as the evil roper's thick tentacles lash out, quickly surrounding them. The 2 men grunt with effort, their blades straining as they struggle to push back against the powerful, writhing appendages. As they fight, Agrita and the saint observe from safe distance. Suddenly, Ophelia leaps into the fray, her sword flashing as she slices through the tentacles. Leon calls out her name, telling her to leave it to them. Her charge is cut short as numerous tentacles ensnare her, wrapping around her limbs and torso and lifting her helplessly into the air. Below, Leon and Ilsa rush forward to aid her. Ilsa moves with astonishing speed, leaping past Ophelia and severing the tentacles holding her captive. She offers a quick apology for her intervention as Ophelia looks on in surprise. Her rescue effort leaves her exposed. In an instant, the monster's tendrils seize her, wrapping tightly around her body and hoisting her high above the ground. Leon screams her name in shock and horror. He watches, his face a mask of fury, as Ilsa dangles helplessly in the creature's grasp. He roars at the monster, demanding that it release her. Fueled by rage, he charges forward, his sword a blur as he carves a path through the writhing tentacles on the ground, desperate to reach her. Just as he gets close, a single tentacle whips out and presses firmly against his mouth, silencing him. Seeing him suddenly in peril, Ilsa cries out his name as a warning. She watches in horror as the mass of tentacles rides where her master was just moments before, and she cries out his name in desperation. Louis, meanwhile, is completely engulfed. The disgusting sensation of the slimy appendages pressing in from all sides confirms his grim realization. He has been swallowed by the evil roper. He assesses his predicament. The tentacles are coiling tighter, attempting to drag him toward the creature's main body. Despite the pressure, he realizes his hand is still free to move, his blade held tight. As his eyes adjust to the fleshy prison, he sees that he is not the only one captured. The Holy Knights, including Baptista, are also ensnared, their armored bodies held limp and unconscious. He understands instantly that the evil roper has taken control of them. He wonders if the knights are even capable of comprehending that their own blades are now pointed at him, ready to be used by the monster. Spotting the creature's large, central eye amidst the chaos, he lunges forward, thrusting his blade with all his might. The blade strikes true, shattering the eye. A blinding flash of light erupts from the monster's core, and the resulting explosion blasts him clear of the writhing mass. He lands hard on a rocky surface, groaning from the impact. To his surprise, he seems to have taken no real damage, a fact he attributes to his rigorous training with Ilsa. Getting his bearings, he sees the wounded monster still clutching Baptista. The knight appears to have regained consciousness and is now calling out his name. Suddenly, Ilsa is upon him, throwing her arms around him in a tight, desperate embrace. Overwhelmed with relief, she calls his name as he stands stunned by the sudden affection. She held him in a tight, possessive embrace, her face flushed. Overwhelmed, she demanded to know why he would do something so reckless. Yet in the next breath, she declared that it was only natural for her to be the one to save him. He struggled against her grip, his expression turning to one of acute discomfort as he tried to explain that his clothes were still covered in the monster's viscous slime. His words had the opposite of the intended effect. Ilsa released him, her expression hardening as she crossed her arms in disapproval, leaving Leon fuming in disbelief at her reaction. Frustrated, he turned his back on her and the assembled group of women who had come to greet him, announcing his intention to leave. The tension finally broke, and he let out a guttural scream of pure, unadulterated frustration. His outburst drew varied reactions from the onlookers. Ophelia erupted in anger, demanding to know why he was making such a scene. The saint, however, simply watched with a serene, knowing smile. Moments later, Marco approached him, gently wiping his face with a cloth and offering words of sympathy for his troubles. Leon managed a quiet word of thanks. Nearby, the saint observed their interaction, a gentle smile on her face as she considered that she and Leon might become good friends. Across the town square, the work of clearing the debris from the battle was underway. Amidst the reconstruction, citizens approached Leon, offering their heartfelt gratitude for his actions. 2 weeks after the petrification incident, the restoration of Polka is proceeding with the church's help, and smiles are returning to the townspeople. The Ricardo family has been executed, and the minister exiled. Leon smiles warmly, expressing his relief that all his companions returned safely. Livia agrees, her expression soft as she affirms how glad she is. As they sit together, Ophelia suggests that since they're all comrades now, they should drop the formal honorifics. She directly addresses the saint, who appears flustered by the suggestion. Her suggestion is met with an intense, silent glare from Livia, who states there is no distance between them as companions. Leon quickly interjects, telling Ophelia to stop using honorifics. He reasons that they are all fellow students, but the short-haired girl points out that their circumstances are not the same. Marco agrees, adding that things have changed for him as well. He explains that he has finally shed his armor, relieving him of a constant threat. Leon's expression turns somber as he glances at the saint, who looks down sadly. He remembers the monstrous fate of Baptista, who is unable to return. The saint thanks him, but insists it is not something he should concern himself with. She reports that the Minerva Holy Church's investigation into the evil rover is ongoing, but details remain unclear. Leon speculates that the evil rover might have been sold in a game, and that the Cabot Maritime Kingdom might have information. Before he can continue, Ophelia cheerfully declares that since their bonds have deepened, it's time to train together again. The short-haired girl reacts with shock, shouting that it's not the time, and that they must focus on their studies until the end-of-term exams are finished. The mention of exams leaves Leon looking stunned. Livia recalls that this academy has end-of-term exams followed by summer break. A memory from her past life surfaces, a swimsuit event. Her recollection is interrupted by Ophelia, who grumbles about training. The short-haired girl asks if she is prepared for the academic exams. Leon, however, grins mischievously, realizing that if he avoids supplementary lessons, he won't be able to participate in the main heroine's swimsuit event. He cheerfully declares that they should all do their best. Livia reassures him that with him around, she has nothing to worry about. Suddenly, the saint clings to his arm, coyly stating that as an excellent saint, she isn't suited for such things. She then reveals that the end-of-term exams include a combat skills test, and she is paired with him every year. Livia's expression darkens with intense jealousy, as a sword and quill are depicted, symbolizing the two parts of the exam. Leon nervously explains to Livia that he is worried about the practical test. It is a 2-on-2 tag match, and while he doesn't believe royalty needs battle skills, he has no choice if it's a requirement. He slumped over the table in despair, lamenting that having his partner announced on the day of the event was too harsh for someone with his social awkwardness. Quirce, watching him, coolly remarked that this was likely a measure to prevent any backroom deals between students. His friends at the table offered their own perspectives on the matter. Marco agreed it seemed plausible, while Ophelia added that for ordinary students, their social standing was too different to even consider defying the arrangement. Quirce concluded that it wouldn't be strange for some to try and buy better grades with money. He continued to eat, but the conversation had ruined his appetite. He considered himself the hated orc of the academy, a total pariah. A grim thought crossed his mind. He might even get stabbed in the back during the match. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. His heart pounded as he suddenly wondered if he was the subject of some whispered threat. However, the footsteps belonged to another student, Ludwig von Ballberg, who walked with a dejected air while carrying his meal tray. Leon watched as other students pointedly avoided the boy. He initially thought it was none of his concern. Another outcast might even lessen the animosity directed his way. But he couldn't bring himself to ignore the boy's isolation. "Hey, you," Leon called out with a friendly smile. "Why don't you eat with us?" Ludwig stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide with surprise. The invitation left Ludwig flustered and overwhelmed. He thought it was far too presumptuous for someone like him to sit with His Highness Rutwi, Her Highness Ophelia, and the Saint. Yet, looking at the one who had invited him, he sensed the distinct air of a fellow comrade. Seeing his hesitation, Leon insisted, telling him not to worry about it, and that everyone was welcome. Beside him, Ophelia nonchalantly added that she didn't mind either. Ludwig, touched by the kindness, managed a quiet "thank you." The short-haired girl smiled, stating that thanks to Leon's words, she was fine with it too. The Saint cheerfully agreed as well. As Ludwig and his attendant, Ilsa, took their seats, Leon formally introduced himself using the name Rutwi. The Saint followed, introducing herself as Natalia. As the group sits together, Marco, the light-haired holy knight, begins the introductions. He gestures to the others, identifying the woman with the high ponytail as Ophelia and the one with glasses as Quirce, his attendant. Ophelia then turns her attention to the flustered Ludwig, who stammers nervously. She asks him what is wrong and demands that he tell them his name. Before he can fully respond, Leon interjects, telling Ophelia not to rush him. He thinks to himself that Ludwig's voice sounds familiar, as if he has heard it somewhere before. Ludwig, meanwhile, offers a quiet apology. With a pained expression, Ludwig finally introduces himself as Gilbert II Gayblot from the Gayblot Marine Kingdom. The name causes Leon to have sudden, sharp realization. Leon's mind flashes back to what he knows of the Gayblot Marine Kingdom. It is a nation of merchants who sell all manner of items to players, from weapons and the evil rover to the philosopher's stone. He understands now, Ludwig is one of them. As Leon processes this, Ludwig continues his introduction. He explains that the Gayblot Marine Kingdom is the only nation with diplomatic ties to the Baldberg Empire, which is currently conquering the Western countries. He concludes by stating that he is now under the care of the Baldberg Empire as Rutwi Baldberg. His complex identity draws a sharp reaction from Ophelia. She asks if he is one of the merchants from that commercial nation, noting that her kingdom has no such relations with them. She accuses his people of dealing in poison, narcotics, and slavery, and of instigating skirmishes to sell their weapons. Her words cast a pall over the entire table. She labels the merchants of Gayblot as merchants of death, who profit from inhumane trade, leaving the group in a tense silence. Leon breaks the silence, stating that he doesn't understand what Ophelia is trying to say and that it has nothing to do with Gilbert. Hearing the accusation, Ludwig apologizes and begins to push his chair back, intending to leave. He is stopped as Leon reaches out and grabs his arm. Leon insists that Ludwig doesn't need to go, declaring that if anyone should leave, it is he, the cursed one, who should depart. Ludwig looks up, his expression a mixture of shock and tearful surprise. He stammers an apology towards Ophelia, who looks away, flustered and unable to meet his gaze. Leon, however, watches her reaction with a subtle, satisfied smirk. Clutching her head in frustration, Ophelia admits that she was wrong to judge Rutwi so harshly. Saint Natalia concurs, confessing with clasped hands that she too had failed to see Gilbert for who he truly was. Sometime later, Leon cheerfully approaches Ludwig, who had been eating lunch alone. Overwhelmed by the gesture, Ludwig begins to weep with gratitude. Nearby, Quirce observes the scene and remarks that he is, after all, Louis. A week passes. In the student salon, Ophelia bursts in, brandishing a bottle and loudly declaring her intention to practice with Rutwi. Quirce, trailing behind her, pointedly asks if she is prepared for the final exams. She sternly tells Ophelia that this is no time for such things. Quirce reminds her that her grades are already lower than everyone else's and insists that she must study and behave more maturely. Her intensity grows as she shouts that the final exams are only 1 week away. She questions Ophelia's dedication, given her daily morning swordsmanship training. Ophelia stares back, stunned into silence by the fierce lecture. At that moment, Ludwig arrives with a stack of papers, cheerfully greeting them and offering to help with their studies again. From a nearby table, Leon and the short-haired girl greet him as Gilbert's senpai. He then turns to Saint Natalia, acknowledging that while he is grateful she is joining their study session, he wonders why she must attend every single day. Leon explains that as a senior who knows the exam trends, Ludwig's help is crucial for improving their grades. The short-haired girl adds that she is there to support Louis-sama, while two snarling dogs, one large and one small, stand guard. Saint Natalia smiles, admitting she doesn't understand everything yet. She muses that if Rutwi were to cross swords with Ophelia, his combination of academic and martial skill would make him a true rising star of the Empire. While tutoring Saint Natalia, Leon reflects on the simplicity of the Imperial Academy's first-year curriculum. For someone with memories of being a university student in a past life, the material is almost laughably easy. His thoughts are interrupted as Natalia leans in extremely close, her face just inches from his. She playfully asks why he's only teaching Quirce and demands that he teach her as well, causing Leon to recoil in surprise. Flustered, he shoves her away, shouting that her behavior is indecent. He insists that she is more than capable enough without his help, but Natalia simply laughs, amused by his reaction. He continues his frantic outburst, declaring that it's only natural to want to keep pests away from the revered saint. He vows not to let any evil bugs get near her, seemingly referring to himself as one of those bugs. The study session continues with the entire group. Ludwig explains a concept to Leon, who finds the explanation remarkably clear, even if he doesn't personally need the tutoring. The others, including a visibly struggling Ophelia, listen on. Ophelia then turns to Leon, asking about his practical skills exam. She remarks that he doesn't look like he would be particularly skilled in combat. Leon, casually nibbling on a snack, looks back at her puzzled. He nonchalantly replies that he's considered a skilled fighter mostly because his weapons are incredibly powerful. The statement leaves Ophelia utterly shocked, unable to reconcile his casual demeanor with the claim of being a formidable warrior. He elaborates, explaining that his father gifted him the sword Durandal to help him get noticed at the imperial court. It's an exceptionally powerful blade, one that could only be acquired when Ishimoto was selected. He muses that a match against Ophelia might be interesting, wondering if his father is being overprotected. Later, Leon shifts his focus to Ilsa, asking about her progress. Embarrassed, she points to her notebook, admitting that she doesn't understand anything beyond a certain point. Her notes devolve into incomprehensible scribbles. He kindly offers to work through the problems with her, and she agrees. As he examines her notebook more closely, however, he notices that the notes haven't just been written poorly, they've been messily erased. A flicker of suspicion crosses his face as he wonders why. He thanks Ilsa for joining him in training, but she reminds him that as his instructor, it is her duty. With a slight bow, she tells him to leave it to her. The training begins with Ilsa launching a volley of daggers at him, which he parries. She explains that this session is to simulate the practical exam, which will be a tag team match. She warns that if he partners with anyone outside their group, their lack of coordination will be a significant disadvantage. After the session, he sits on a bench to catch his breath, suggesting they rest. Ilsa agrees. He muses that life at the academy is nothing like the game he remembers, and he must be prepared for the final exams. With this in mind, he decides that Ilsa will be his partner for the practical test. Hearing this, Ilsa seems taken aback. She questions his choice, reminding him that he has other potential partners like Ophelia and Natalia. He considers her point, acknowledging Ophelia's superior physical strength and Natalia's unmatched magical prowess. He realizes that as a defense-specialized fighter, he would be a good match for either of them. His thoughts then turn to his other allies. He recalls that Quirce and two others have already been claimed as partners by the Holy Knights, and Marco has likely partnered with another man. He concludes that choosing from the rest of the group isn't an option. Having weighed his options, he turns back to Ilsa with a confident smile. He tells her that even if Gilbert were in their year, his choice would remain unchanged. Partnering with her, he declares, is the most reassuring option. A surprised Ilsa can only utter his name. A blush spreads across her face as she admits she wants to be his partner too, confessing that simply being by his side is enough for her. Taken aback by her sincerity, Leon listens as she asks if they can go somewhere together after the exams. He readily agrees. On the day of the written exam, Ophelia is visibly overwhelmed, practically steaming with stress. Leon, however, is all smiles as he asks his friend how they felt about the test. Quirce mentions she answered everything but the final question, while Gilbert gives a non-committal so-so in response. He cheerfully announces that he answered every question, earning praise from Quirce. Leon then turns his teasing grin towards Ophelia, vowing to crush her in the practical exam that afternoon and telling her not to hold back. She cedes silently, her fists clenched in frustration. Still laughing, he turns and accidentally collides with another student. His expression shifts instantly to one of shock as he stammers out an apology. The student he bumped into is a small girl with dark, braided hair and glasses, now sitting on the floor. She is Karen Rosard Estania, the second princess of the Estania Magic Kingdom. Despite the fall, she looks up calmly and insists that there is no problem. As Leon helps her up, Marco calls out to him, asking what he is doing. Startled, Princess Karen quickly runs off. Natalia, standing beside Leon, asks if he knows the princess, explaining that she's a prodigy of holy magic studying abroad, though she shouldn't have a role to play in their current affairs. Her expression becomes serious as she reveals that the Minerva Papal State is closely monitoring the Estania Magic Kingdom. The kingdom is suspected of conducting numerous illegal experiments, including the creation and distribution of magic-amplifying drugs, all under the pretext of perfecting magic. Natalia continues, stating firmly that the princess and her twin brother, Selhio, must not be involved in the development of so-called magic weapons. A brief, startling image of Karen conjuring a volatile sphere of dark energy comes to mind. She concedes that while the nation itself is at fault, she believes things are different with Karen this time. Ophelia, arms crossed, cuts in, warning them not to judge the princess with the same prejudice they once held against Gilbert, lest they repeat the same mistakes. At that moment, Gilbert himself appears, clapping a hand on Leon's back with a broad smile. He cheerfully asks what they're all talking about, explaining that he was waiting for them to go to the cafeteria together. He looks from face to face, but before anyone can answer, Leon leans in and whispers, asking who that person is while glancing toward Ophelia. Gilbert is taken aback, letting out a flustered sigh of exasperation. He confronts a young woman with short dark hair, reminding her with irritation that while his father and brother forced him to bring her along, he had explicitly told her not to approach him at the academy. Unfazed, she calmly states that she is applying to be an attendant for someone named Irina. From a distance, a young woman with long, light-colored hair named Irina observes the attendant. She internally remarks that the girl's atmosphere is similar to Ilsa's, possessing the same air as an assassin. Following this thought, she approaches Gilbert, calling out to Gil Senpai to get his attention. Startled by her sudden appearance, he brusquely tells her to go away and pushes her aside. His attention then shifts to Leon, who quietly asks if he has a certain item. Gilbert confirms he has it in his room, and, since he has no use for it himself, offers the rectangular, card-like object to Leon. Leon gratefully accepts with a firm handshake, explaining that possessing the item will give him peace of mind before the first-year practical exams. Smiling, Gilbert replies that it's a small price to pay for his sake. Elsewhere, a young man with light hair notices his companion, a girl with long bangs, has fallen silent. He gently asks her what is wrong. She looks down, quietly responding that there is something she is praying for at the sanctuary. In the distance, fireworks light up the night sky behind a couple dancing. The time for the practical exams arrives. An instructor stands before a line of students in athletic gear, assembled on the castle ramparts. The instructor announces that the pairings will now be revealed and that students should move to their designated positions when called. As the announcements begin, Leon prays fervently to be partnered with Ilsa. The tension breaks when the first pair is called, Ilsa Hildebrand and Natalia Silvestri. Both women are stunned into silence by the decision, while Leon shouts in disbelief that those two have been made a pair. The unexpected pairing causes a stir among the other students. Ophelia watches with a smirk, anticipating the next announcement. From her vantage point, she observes Ilsa and Natalia standing together, noting their obvious animosity and wondering aloud if they can possibly cooperate. As the practical exam pairings are announced, Leon is stunned to hear his name called alongside a student from another class, Karen Roser Destania. He reacts with wide-eyed shock, while Karen, a girl with braided dark hair and glasses, maintains a stoic, unreadable expression. The scene shifts to the dueling grounds where the first match is set to begin, featuring the unlikely team of Ilsa and Natalia. From the sidelines, Leon turns to his new partner, suggesting they watch the upcoming match. Karen remains silent. Undeterred, he enthusiastically pumps his fist in the air, shouting encouragement to his friends. His cheer catches the attention of Ophelia and Natalia, who seem to recognize he is cheering for Ilsa under his alias, Rutwi. Leon worries to himself that Ilsa and Natalia won't be able to communicate, but Karen's gaze shifts slightly toward the field, a flicker of interest on her face. On the field, both Ilsa and Natalia turn toward him, waving with bright, confident smiles. Seeing their apparent unity, he feels a wave of relief. The moment the match begins, Ilsa explodes into motion. She closes the distance on her male opponent in a blur of speed, arriving before he can even process her movement. Before he can react, Ilsa has him pinned to the ground with a dagger at his throat. Simultaneously, Natalia calmly casts a wind cutter spell from a distance, incapacitating the other opponent and ending the match in an instant. After their swift victory, the duo approaches Leon and Karen. He remarks on their overwhelming power. Natalia explains that she used her reflection ability to predict their opponent's moves, a feat Ilsa admits was impressive. Ilsa adds that Natalia's support was, of course, a given, bringing a pleased smile to Natalia's face. Natalia then wishes him luck, reminding him that his match is next. As Leon turns to go, Karen gently tugs the back of his shirt and quietly tells him to be careful. He smiles in acknowledgement and walks toward the arena with his partner. On the field, Leon faces his opponents, two young men armed with a bow and a sword. They sneer, one remarking that they won't be penalized for hurting a pawn like him. The other laughs, eager to get it over with. Leon overhears their taunts, his expression hardening. He barely had time to register the start of the match before something wet and viscous splattered across his face. Stunned, Leon could only stare forward in confusion as his partner, Karen, stood silently beside him. In an instant, she retaliated. With a focused gaze, Karen unleashed a powerful fireball spell, which erupted with explosive force directly in front of their opponents. The spell's aftershock rippled through the air as she turned to the still-shocked Leon, calmly stating that it was overkill. The teacher quickly called an end to the match, summoning the medical team as the crowd murmured about the excessive force. As Ilsa approached to check on him, Leon felt useless, like a savage orc who had done nothing. Then he noticed his shield, triggering a memory. He recalled a younger Ludwig, beaming with pride as he held up a large shield. The boy had explained that his father had given it to him along with the sword Durandal, calling it the pride of Gablot, the Iron Wall of the North. In that memory, a boy who looked just like Leon asked if he could really have a shield. Ludwig confirmed it, saying he'd had it adjusted. The boy noted its small size was perfect for one-handed use, and Ludwig, smiling, said he had a favor to ask in return. The scene shifted to another time, where Ilsa spoke with Natalia about a request from Ludwig. Natalia insisted she was fine, but Ilsa clarified the condition was that Natalia not use her magic flute. Nearby, a bored Ophelia complained about the lack of a real challenge in her match before calling out to Ludwig. Still unsatisfied, she told him she hoped for a stronger opponent next time. Ludwig, looking weary but managing a smile, simply agreed. Back in the present, Leon's mind raced. He knew of the magic flute, an absolute control-type weapon born from the Estania Kingdom's research. He considered it the worst kind of tool for a country that would treat its own princess like a pawn, picturing Karen manipulated by strings. The thought was chilling. He recalled a crucial detail from the game's lore. Karen's character profile included a demerit tied to the magic flute. A terrible side effect, a state abnormality known as berserk. He recalled the weapon's properties, an indiscriminate area of effect attack. In the game, its use was limited to 5 turns, but he wondered how long that restriction would last in this reality. As her partner, he knew he had to be wary of her going berserk. Just then, an announcement declared the end of the first match for the first-year students, instructing everyone to prepare for the second match after a short break. He was snapped out of his thoughts by the cheers of his friends. Ophelia and Clarice called out encouragement to Marco. Leon, still processing the situation, could only manage a simple, "Good luck." As the group cheered, Ophelia's gaze drifted down a nearby corridor. She spotted Marco speaking with Sophia. A moment later, Marco approached Leon and Ilsa. He commented with a smile that it seemed Sophia was getting entangled with Karen's twin brother, Sergio. He dismissed it as nothing to worry about, suggesting they were overthinking things, before turning his attention to Ilsa. From nearby, Ophelia watched the exchange, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Marco's seemingly friendly demeanor did not fool her. She saw the darkness behind his smile, and her expression turned to one of shock as she processed his words and their implications. Ilsa covered her face, sighing that her thoughts had been read. Leon, completely lost, could only ask what she meant. Marco explained to Ophelia that he had been discussing Princess Karen's magic, describing it as a performance. He revealed that from the very start of the practical exam, Prince Sergio had been promoting Princess Karen's abilities. Ilsa elaborated on her realization. It seemed to her that the Estania Kingdom was trying to sell their magic flute to the Belga Kingdom. She concluded that they would likely reveal even more of its performance in the second match. Ludwig considers his next move. He wonders if he should throw the match with all his strength, just as he had before. He covers his mouth, a bead of sweat on his brow. He resolves that he cannot allow his opponent to be put in danger, but he is unsure of what to do. His thoughts are interrupted by an official announcement calling for the next match. The team of Rutwi, Sophia, Sergio, and Karen. Ludwig turns in shock, realizing he is pitted against Sophia and her partner. A memory flashes through his mind of the entrance ceremony, where Ilsa had witnessed him being teased. He recalls his former self's perspective, in which Sophia was merely one of several heroines. As the memory of Sophia, pointing an accusatory finger surfaces, he acknowledges that the feelings of the previous, Rutwi, still smolder within him. Returning to the present, he hardens his resolve. He is not the same person he once was, and he must get his feelings under control. Across the field, Sophia smirks at him while licking a frozen treat. She turns to her partner, Sergio, remarking that changing one's appearance doesn't change who they are. She declares she doesn't want to get near Ludwig and asks Sergio to handle it. With a confident smile, he assures her he will. He then levels his staff in Ludwig and Karen's direction, instructing Sophia not to move a single step from her spot. He tells her to simply watch and enjoy the show. His gaze fixes on Ludwig as he sneers, asking how he could be paired with such a piece of junk. The insult leaves Ludwig stunned. He turns to his partner, Karen, who looks utterly dejected. He tries to encourage her, suggesting they do their best together, but she remains silent, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Her lack of response makes him uneasy. He faced his opponent, Sergio, who questioned his change in weaponry, asking if he had abandoned his dual swords. With a wide grin, Ludwig brandished a large shield and a mace, explaining that he wanted to try using a shield as well and enthusiastically asking if it didn't look cool. His taunt hit its mark. Ludwig cheekily asked if Sergio knew him well enough to be aware of his dual-wielding preference, even questioning if Sergio had a fondness for him. Enraged by the mockery, Sergio roared as the match began, lunging forward with a spear. Ludwig stood his ground, catching the powerful thrust squarely on his shield with a deafening clang. He pushed back, refusing to yield an inch as he continued to provoke his opponent, asking if Sergio wanted to test him further. From the sidelines, Sophia observed with a critical eye, noting aloud that the shield's performance was impressive, just as one would expect from Gil Senpai. In that moment of distraction, a swift attack grazed Ludwig's cheek, leaving a thin cut. He recoiled in surprise, wondering what had just happened. Before him stood Princess Karen, her hand outstretched and glowing with protective energy. She had intercepted the blow, her expression hardening as she declared that she would not permit any attacks on her master. In the training grounds, Princess Karen stands defensively, declaring that she will not allow her master to be harmed. A short distance away, Ludwig looks on in confusion, questioning who she means by master. Beside him, Sergio smirks knowingly while Sophia stands ready. Karen realizes the situation. It is a 3-against-1 confrontation. Before Ludwig can process her words, Sophia unleashes a spell, shouting, "Icebind." A wave of sharp ice crystals erupts from the ground, rushing toward him. He instinctively raises a large wooden board to defend himself, bracing for the impact. The ice shatters violently against his makeshift shield. Watching the assault, Karen's expression hardens, and she clenches her fist, silently warning them not to lay a hand on her master. He struggles under the magical barrage, turning to the instructor, Ilsa, who is observing with the other students. He shouts in protest, asking if she intends to let this unfair situation continue. She responds with authority, her voice sharp. Ilsa declares that attacking a staff member is forbidden and that the match is now null and void. She orders them to stop at once or face disqualification. Her warning is directed at Sergio and Sophia, who receive a severe reprimand. Sergio then turns his attention to Karen, coldly informing her that for attacking an ally, she has been disqualified. He and Sophia exchange a subtle, knowing glance, their plan having seemingly succeeded. Ludwig watches the exchange, completely bewildered by the turn of events. From the side, Sergio's faint, triumphant smirk is visible. His confusion turns to shock as he looks back at Karen. A dark, violent aura erupts around her as she begins to lose control. Ludwig recognizes the signs immediately. She has entered a berserk state. Alarmed, Sophia shouts for everyone to get back. As the other students begin to flee in terror, Ludwig screams at the top of his lungs for everyone to run. He braces himself, shield raised, as the berserk Karen unleashes a volley of fiery projectiles, declaring her intent to eliminate him. His shield erupts with a hexagonal energy field, a spell he calls Reflection, deflecting the incoming blasts. In the background, Ilsa leads Sophia and other students in a hasty retreat, calling out to check if everyone is safe. He turns to Ilsa, warning her that Karen is too fast and dangerous for her to handle. He gives a direct order, take care of the evacuated students. Ilsa asks for his instructions for herself. Ignoring her question, he turns his gaze back to the rampaging princess, identifying her as a magic weapon, and vowing that he will be the one to stop Karen Rosardistania. The ground around them is scorched and ruined. Karen stands over him as he kneels, telling him it is time to begin. He rises to his feet, declaring that this will be a battle between just the two of them. Her response is a single cold command, annihilate. In response, she unleashes a powerful wave of force, sending him skidding backward as he struggles to block the immense pressure with his shield. He digs his heels in, holding his ground against the onslaught. With a confident smirk, he asks if that is all she has. Her assault falters. A memory surfaces of herself in a fine dress, recalling how she once thought of herself as a weapons-based heroine from a game, only to realize that reality was far crueler. In the present, blood trickles from her lip as the strain takes its toll. She recalled being shunned by the king and her own twin brother. Despite their rejection, she had desperately wanted to be a part of their family. The memory brings a wave of pain as she wonders why she must endure such feelings. Across the battlefield, Ludwig watches her, his expression hardening with a sudden understanding of her suffering. His eyes widened in shock as he saw tears streaming down Karen's face. With a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth, she looked at him with sorrowful confusion, asking why he was crying for her. The scene shifts to a memory. A different young man with spiky hair and a confident grin tells Karen that her hesitation is just a matter of spirit, then asks if she still intends to fight. She looks away, her expression troubled, and explains that this is an order from someone named Sergio. He insists they settle things at once, reassuring her that Sergio won't blame her even if she defeats him. He adds that he's close to overheating and becoming inoperable anyway. Karen retorts that the backlash from the fight will render him inoperable, calling him a piece of junk that Sergio would easily see through. Annoyed, she mutters for him to shut up. His smile vanishes, replaced by a sharp intensity. He calls her pitiful for seeking her family only to be cast aside, urging her to break down completely and unleash everything she's holding back. Provoked beyond her limit, Karen screams in fury, unleashing a chaotic storm of dark energy orbs. The young man stands his ground, holding up a device, and declares that he will accept all of her thoughts, sorrow, and pain. The immense volley of energy slams into him, erupting in a massive explosion that shatters the surrounding ground. Moments later, the chaos subsides. The young man now stands behind Karen, holding her gently in an embrace. Her rage spent, she is calm and subdued. The memory concludes as another figure, Sergio, appears. He glares with fury, commanding the man, "Don't touch her." He identifies the woman as his sister, Karen Rosardistania, the the first princess, and snarls at the other man not to touch her so casually, calling him a filthy orc. He furiously points at the young man holding his sister, declaring that to cause such a disaster and embrace her is an act of supreme evil and cowardice. He demands to know if the man truly believes he can get away with such an offense against a royal from another nation. He continues his tirade, stating that the man has endangered a princess of the great Alburan noble family. On the honor of the empire, he swears that he will pursue him and ensure he takes full responsibility for his actions. Before the situation can escalate further, the maid Ilsa moves with swift efficiency. She binds the young man's arms, forcing him to his knees. She gives an order to call the guards and restrain Princess Karen, then warns her captive not to make any sudden moves, lest she break him. Sergio watches, momentarily stunned by her decisive action. He looks on as Ilsa holds the subdued man, calling out to him and asking what is happening. He touches his own face, a look of confusion spreading across his features. He then holds up a small, syringe-like device with a grin, remarking that he used it to make the princess self-destruct, calling it a waste. The restrained young man looks up from the ground, his eyes wide with shock and realization. The memory shifts to Princess Karen, collapsed on the ground and weeping. A single thought echoes in her mind. All she ever wanted was to be loved. The scene changes again to an earlier time. A frail, younger Karen sits in a wheelchair beside her twin brother. As the twin children of the Estania magic kingdom, everyone expected her brother to be the sole successor. Due to her weak body, no one held any expectations for Karen. From her wheelchair, she wonders if the next test subject for the magic tool has been found. She knows it is difficult to find someone with sufficient magical power among the common people. Her father appears before her, a dark smile on his face, stating he has an idea. From the doorway, Karen pleads with him to use her. She believes that if she becomes a test subject, her family will finally look at her. That is all she desires. The memory fades, leaving the image of Karen standing alone in a large, opulent bedroom, the weight of her past plea lingering in the silence. She lay quietly in bed, her eyes barely open, as Ludwig approached with a cheerful smile. He greeted her as Your Highness Karen and asked how she was feeling. He continued, his expression turning serious, explaining that the Baldberg Empire had officially labeled the recent events as an act of terrorism by the Estania Magic Kingdom. He informed her that while Sergio had been taken away, she herself had been sentenced to death. The news stunned her. She stammered that Estania would never be involved in such a thing, questioning how they could make such a baseless accusation against her. The second princess, Karen Rose of Estania. Ludwig confirmed that was indeed the official story, adding that the real princess was supposedly still within Estania's borders. The implication left Karen trembling and speechless. He laid out the grim reality of her situation. Since she was officially not the princess, the Empire was free to either execute her or spare her. He declared that he had made the decision to let her live. Her reaction was not one of relief. Instead, she cried out in anguish, demanding to know why he wouldn't just kill her. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I'm asking you. Her desperate plea seemed to trigger a memory. He recalled his purpose, being reincarnated into this world to avoid a bad ending, undergoing special training with Ilsa, and even saving Borgonia. He acknowledged to himself that he had done all for his own survival. Looking at the weeping Karen, he admitted a hard truth. He never intended to save everyone in this world. He knelt by her bedside, his voice low but firm. He confessed his true goal, to completely destroy the main scenario of the game in order to guide everyone toward a happy end. He then offered her a new path, extending a hand. He told her that she should make allies within the Empire. Correcting himself, he smiled and said, No, we will welcome you. His words hung in the air between them. Stunned, Karen stared at his outstretched hand, tears still glistening on her cheeks, as she whispered the word. Allies? Her tears streamed down her face as she asked if he would truly let her join him as a companion. Ludwig beamed, assuring her that of course he would. He would be happy to have her. The overwhelming relief caused her to let out a small, choked laugh through her sobs. She grasped his hand tightly, her expression a mixture of joy and gratitude, mirroring his own warm smile. 2 weeks later, the end-of-term exam results were posted. A crowd of students, including Ludwig and his friends, gathered before the large notice board to see their rankings. He scratched the back of his head, looking somewhat sheepish as he noted that Ophelia had at least managed to avoid failing grades. Beside him, she ground her teeth in frustration, having placed outside the rankings while Ludwig himself had secured first place. She clenched her fist, declaring that if she was going to commit, she would do so with all her might, aiming for first place next time. Ludwig thought to himself that was an unreasonable goal, while nearby, Leon cheered for him, amazed at his intelligence. The results were indeed remarkable. Leon congratulated Ludwig, whom he called Gil Senpai, on his first-place finish among the first years. Natalia, who had tied for first, beamed with joy. Ilsa, who placed third, also offered her congratulations. It was the first time in the Empire's history that 2 students had tied for second place overall, a feat Ludwig and Ilsa now shared after she had been with him for years. Karen, holding a lollipop, clenched her fists in admiration. She declared that her master was truly worthy of respect. Ludwig, slightly flustered, managed a simple thank you. As he spoke, Ilsa intervened, plucking the lollipop from Karen's mouth. She coldly informed Karen that she was being too familiar and that this was none of her concern. Pointing a stern finger, Ilsa reminded the stunned girl of her place. She was a subordinate, ordered to serve Louis-sama, and nothing more. She found herself immediately confronted by a girl with short, dark hair who had taken hold of Leon's arm. The girl asserted her authority, declaring herself Karen's superior and demanding that Karen follow her instructions and keep her distance. Leon, caught between them, could only grimace in discomfort. The tense moment was observed by Natalia, who approached Leon with an amused smile. She commented on how they both seemed to be troubled by their respective followers. He could only offer a strained laugh in agreement, the tension still palpable. As they proceeded down the corridor together, Leon found himself walking amidst his growing and contentious retinue, with Ophelia and Sergio leading the way, followed by Natalia and the short-haired girl, and with Karen trailing behind him. He had a sinking feeling. He could already sense a massive stomachache brewing from this complicated arrangement. At a school assembly, an official at a podium announces to the students that their break will begin the following day. He cautions them, however, not to neglect their daily training. As the students disperse, Leon lets out a sigh of relief, remarking to Ilsa and Karen that they can finally relax for a month. Ilsa quietly affirms his sentiment. Later, while sitting together on a bench, Leon suggests to Ilsa that since their final exams are over, the two of them should go somewhere to have some fun. Before she can respond, a voice urgently calls out Leon's name. It is Ludwig, who rushes toward them, shouting about a promise that was made. He excitedly reminds Leon of their deal. In exchange for the cheat shield, Leon had agreed to visit Gablot. Ludwig, addressing him as Gil Senpai, insists that he come and play. Flustered, but remembering the arrangement, Leon agrees. This sudden development prompts Karen to ask Ilsa if she recalls such a promise. With her eyes closed in thought, Ilsa confirms that she does remember something to that effect. Overhearing them, Leon invites both Ilsa and Karen to join the trip, calling it a small outing. He then pleads with Ludwig not to look at him with such expectant eyes, though Ludwig seems more interested in playing with Ilsa. With that, Leon declares the matter settled. The group arrives at a bustling port city overlooking the water. Leon gazes at the impressive view with an excited exclamation, while Ilsa smiles happily beside him. A large sailing vessel makes its way toward their destination, the Gablot Marine Kingdom, a commercial nation comprised of small islands. Their specific destination is the capital, Sicilia Island. On the ship's deck, as Ludwig calls out to Leon, Karen stands mesmerized. Her eyes sparkle as she gazes at the vast expanse of water, murmuring that this is the first time she has ever seen the sea. She waved enthusiastically from the ship's railing, calling out for them to wait. Turning to Leon, she confessed that she'd never been away from home for so long and was starting to feel lonely. Leon dryly reminded her it was only the second day of summer vacation. She then explained their next step. They would travel from here to the royal palace by boat. With their course set, the grand sailing vessel pulled away from the port city, its massive sails billowing in the wind as it headed for the open sea. Upon their arrival, Leon stood on a stone pier, marveling at Ludwig, who was already in the shallows. Ludwig, however, explained that his footing was unsteady and asked Leon to grab his hand for support. He reached down without hesitation, pulling Ludwig up onto the pier. Ludwig smiled gratefully, thanking him for the assistance. Their relief was short-lived as a tremendous splash erupted beside the pier. From the ship's deck, Ilsa and another maid cried out in alarm, shouting for their master, Louis. Leon's face contorted in panic, thinking Ludwig had fallen back in and was about to sink. Beside him, Karen knelt at the water's edge, anxiously asking if Ludwig was all right. From the water, however, Ludwig simply smiled and reached up a hand, calmly assuring them that everything was fine. Leon stared down, his initial fear replaced by a growing sense of confusion, a single bead of sweat tracing a path down his face. His gaze locked on Ludwig's torso. The white shirt, soaked through, clung tightly to a figure that was unmistakably feminine. The truth struck him. Leon's eyes widened in shock while Karen shrieked, turning away with a furious blush. Ludwig, now flustered, tried to cover his chest. Leon's mind reeled with the impossible revelation. Gil Senpai was a girl. His shock is interrupted by a blade striking the cobblestones nearby. On the dock, a large, imposing figure looms over them, roaring about what they are doing to his sister. The man, identified by a bystander as Massimo, the enemy of evil men, glares down at them. Leon, still processing, hears Salve confirm that this is the Gilbert she had spoken of. Massimo's knuckles whiten on his sword hilt as he snarls, accusing them of laying a hand on his precious sister. In a swift motion, he grabs Ludwig and hoists her upside down by the ankle. Leon watches in horror, his mind reeling from the revelation that Gil Senpai is a girl, and now this delinquent brother has appeared. He desperately wishes for Ilsa's help, feeling completely out of his depth. His frantic thoughts are cut short as his gaze drifts back to the ship. He sees Karen and Livia watching the entire chaotic scene unfold, their expressions unreadable, and a cold dread washes over him at having been seen in such a state. Massimo, however, pays him no mind, instead bellowing orders at his subordinates on the dock to capture the intruders. His face contorts with rage as he declares his intent to turn them into fish food. Below the surface, Leon realizes with terror that he is about to be drowned. Before Massimo can act, Ludwig, now back on the cobblestones, shouts for him to stop. She declares that she will never forgive her brother if he proceeds. Massimo, sweating, tries to justify his actions, claiming he had no choice to protect Gilberta. Ludwig rushes to Leon's side, who coughs that he was saved. The tense standoff is broken by the arrival of a calm, well-dressed man who wonders about the commotion. Ludwig's expression softens in recognition as she calls out to her other brother, Antonio. Antonio calmly reprimands Massimo for his impulsive behavior, noting it's a diplomatic issue. Turning to Ludwig, he formally welcomes her to Gablot. Leon, standing beside her, can only manage a polite request to be taken care of. With the situation diffused, the group later relaxes on a private royal beach. Ludwig stretches happily, telling everyone to cheer up, while Livia and Karen stand beside her in their swimwear, looking less than thrilled. She shyly asks for Leon's opinion, her cheeks flushed as they stand in the water. He, momentarily flustered by her appearance, stammers that it suits her very well. His curiosity piqued. He asks why she had to pretend to be a man. With Ilsa and Karen listening nearby, Ludwig explains that her father and brothers insisted on it to keep pests away. Leon realizes with a sweat drop that being a Gablot woman is a dangerous position. He then apologizes for having kept his own secrets. Ludwig, however, waves it off, telling him not to worry. She reassures him that she felt they had gotten along well from the very beginning and that nothing has changed between them. Her words bring a smile to his face. He reflects that his deep respect for Gil Senpai as a wonderful person remains completely unaltered. Suddenly embarrassed by the conversation, Ludwig declares it's time for a swim and dashes into the ocean waves, leaving a slightly bewildered Leon behind. His attention then shifts to Karen, who wistfully remarks that she wishes she had a figure like Gilberta's senpai or Ilsa. The comment makes Leon inwardly despair, questioning the very existence of old-fashioned school swimsuits in this world. Noticing his troubled expression, Ilsa approaches with a parasol to shield him from the sun, asking if he is feeling all right. As Ludwig joins them under the shade, she earnestly warns him to be careful around her brothers. The sudden, serious warning startles him. Ilsa elaborates on the warning, stating that while she has mentioned their overprotectiveness, Massimo's aggression in particular warrants caution. She also reveals that another of her charges, one of Ludwig's brothers, is also present. Leon gazes at the Gablot Marine Kingdom, contemplating the sheer number of powerful figures gathered there. The thought triggers a sudden, sharp realization, as if a crucial piece of a puzzle has just snapped into place in his mind. He finds himself at the beach, where Karen playfully splashes water, urging him to hurry into the sea. With a sigh of resignation, he agrees, while Ludwig, now in a swimsuit, watches with a gentle smile. Later, the setting shifts to a grand evening party. Dressed in his formal uniform, he looks around in awe at the opulent hall, while Karen stands beside him in an elegant gown, her hands clasped demurely. Noticing her expression, he asks if she is nervous. Karen admits that it is her first time attending such a party. To comfort her, he confesses that he is not accustomed to them either and, suggesting they stick together, he gently takes her hand. Seated at a table laden with food, he cheerfully tells Karen to enjoy herself, pointing out a fish dish he says is a specialty of Gil Senpai. Smiling, she agrees, saying she will enjoy it with her master. He later finds Ilsa, remarking that he had hoped she could enjoy the festivities as well. She clarifies that her true duty is to monitor for any suspicious activity from the shadows, as that is her real job. As the crowd grows, an announcer's voice cuts through the chatter, heralding the arrival of His Majesty King Pietro, His Highness Antonio, His Highness Massimo, and Her Highness Gilberta. The grand, fur-lined cape of the approaching king sweeps into view, a small, ornate crown visible just beneath its edge. The royal party makes their entrance. The imposing king, flanked by his sons, the composed Antonio and the scowling Massimo, and beside them, Ludwig, now presented to all as Princess Gilberta in a stunning gown. The monarch, King Pietro II Gablot, addresses Leon directly, acknowledging him as his daughter Gilberta's friend. He then declares that he wished to welcome the crown prince of the empire, noting this is a historic first in Gablot's 300-year history, leaving Leon stunned. The king's voice booms with conviction as he proclaims that this visit is official proof of their nation's recognition by the Western countries. He wishes to express his gratitude for the empire's courageous decision, as Massimo glares with irritation and Antonio remains impassive. He reflects on the king's words, realizing with a wry smile that his simple visit to a friend's house has been masterfully turned into a political maneuver. King Pietro too praises Gilberta for serving as a bridge between their two nations, a sentiment that leaves Leon feeling outplayed while Karen stands by, looking on. From across the hall, a young woman with short dark hair waves cheerfully, calling out to both Leon and Karen. She approaches and apologizes profusely to Leon for her father's strange greeting. Leon dismisses her concerns, stating that it is mutually beneficial for the Empire and Gablot to join hands. This person, Gilberta, insists that Leon wasn't being calculating and that this is simply an apology and an invitation. She urges him to enjoy himself without reservation. Karen adds her thanks, and Leon watches as Gilberta is addressed with royal deference. He thinks back on the formal greeting with the king, relieved that the rest of the evening proceeded peacefully as they moved away from the main hall. From a balcony overlooking the festivities, Ilsa reports to Karen that she has observed no suspicious movements. Karen, remarking on the delicious food, watches Gilberta below, and admits she is letting herself be spoiled by her sweet words and enjoying the chance to relax. The next morning, a pleasant breakfast is laid out, with the castle visible in the distance under a clear sky. Ilsa greets Leon, asking if he slept well. Just then, Gilberta, now dressed in casual shorts and suspenders, bounds into the room, announcing that since there was a dinner party last night, she is now a guest. Ilsa immediately tries to correct her, reminding her that she is supposed to be helping serve. With a pleading expression, Gilberta asks Ilsa to eat with them. Visibly flustered by the breach of protocol, Ilsa formally accepts the invitation. As they settle at the table, Karen, now wearing a maid's uniform, approaches and tells them to eat up quickly. Still dressed as a maid, she insists that Leon and Gilbert eat without waiting for her. Leon, taken aback, calls out her name, Karen, while Gilbert simply laughs at the situation. The group takes their seats around the large dining table, a full breakfast spread before them. He happily takes his first bite, as Karen enthusiastically tells him to eat his fill, assuring him there's plenty more. But a moment later, his face contorts in agony. He gasps, clutching his throat as he tumbles from his seat to the ground, shocking the others who immediately rush to his side. Lying on the floor, he feels a searing heat emanating from the back of his throat, a burning pain that consumes him. Gilbert watches in horror as a dark, viscous substance spills from Leon's lips. Karen cries out his name in disbelief, while Ilsa urgently calls for a doctor and a priest to be summoned at once. His consciousness fades into a black void, his body tumbling through nothingness. A final thought surfaces. Has he reached a bad end?